This is a reading of Collected Works number 266, the first of 3 volumes, entitled From the Esoteric School, Esoteric Lessons 1904 to 1909, by Rudolf Steiner. This is section 11 of my recordings. Again, some of these are very small, short transcripts, as it were, of memories, people who were at the lessons. They were not allowed to be written down while they were there, so I have broken this up in different ways. This section 11 is the second half of the year 1906. Esoteric lesson given in Munich on November 6, 1906, manuscript from Alice Kinkel. Esoteric schooling leads humans to freedom. It leads them to become master of various beings that are constantly flowing through the human body, going in and out of it, so that the human being becomes a companion to these beings. Their names are phantoms in quotes for the physical body, ghosts in quotes for the etheric body, demons in quotes for the astral body, spirits in quotes for the capital I. In order to learn how to master them, we must create a firm skeleton, a firm framework of the etheric body. Just as the physical body has in its framework of bones, this framework is the pentagram for the etheric body, and there's a 5-pointed star. At the top, a point of head thinking. The 2 left and right arms of the star are B, arms feeling, and the 2 lower points are feet willing. Similarly, a framework is to be formed for the astral body that is a hexagram. And readers aside, this is again a Jewish star. The top a point of head. Right across there, C and C is ears. Below that, straight across B and B, is arms. And D just has an asterisk. Footnote, Marie Steiner inserted heart here, at the D at the bottom. So there would be head at the top, heart at the bottom. The 2 top points are ears, 2 lower points, arms. End of readers aside, as it were. In order to achieve this, the following 4 fundamental principles are to be developed. Number 1. Learn to keep silent and power will come to you. Number 2. Give up power and the ability to will come to you. Number 3. Give up willing and feeling will come to you. Number 4. Give up feeling and knowledge will come to you. Those are 4 steps to which the human being can ascend. Every suppression gives a certain power. The spirits and beings that constantly rule the human being and make us unfree. If we know them, then we no longer need to be their slaves. The first thing the pupil must learn and practice is attention to him or herself. And that is the end of that esoteric lesson. Esoteric lesson given in Berlin on November 14, 1906. Record A is a manuscript from Mathilde Scholl, Anna Weissmann. Record B, manuscript from Eugenie Bredorf. Record C, manuscript from Mathilde Hoyer. Record D. The exercises that are to be carried out by those involved in an esoteric schooling will be further explained in this contemplation. For those who have not yet had to carry out these exercises, the explanations given here will be a preparation for the time when they, too, will have to carry out these exercises. The great masters of wisdom and harmony of feelings guide us in our inner struggle for knowledge. A well-known exercise is this, that one first concentrates on the point at the root of the nose between the eyebrows, within the head, then on the point within the larynx, then on the point extended to a line that extends from the shoulders to the arms and hands, and then the point drawn even further apart that expands to cover the entire surface of the body. In the Secret Doctrine, one also speaks of these lines and surfaces as a point. We want to better understand this exercise. In order to do this, we must go far back in our thoughts and place ourselves in the Lemurian age. The earth looked entirely different then. At that time, what is now solid rock flowed like water. Air in the present sense was not yet present. The entire earth was sheathed in hot vapors. Many metals that are solid today were in vaporous form there, or they ran like water. The vaporous atmosphere was filled with streams of etheric forces, as today it is filled with streams of air. Human beings were already living on this earth, but they were a kind of fishbird animal that moved about hovering and swimming. Now an important event occurred in human evolution at that time. When the human beings formed a skin and closed themselves off from the rest of the world, becoming independent beings. Until then, human beings were not separated from their environment, but rather the streams of the entire world flowed into them. Now, however, they were closed off by the skin. This enclosure was brought about by a very specific etheric stream. After a certain time, another significant event occurred. Human beings brought themselves into an upright position and thereby gave their entire striving and actions a certain direction. Before that, the bodies of human beings were oriented the same way as present-day animals, Only now could human beings form and shape their front members, their arms and hands as they are shaped today. That is, for work in the actual sense. Only now could human beings begin to work independently. Only now could they develop their individual karma. No animal can do that. A second special etheric stream brought about this transformation. A third etheric stream had a third important transformation as consequence. Only now, when human beings developed an upright gait, could they develop the lungs that are unique to human beings. And, connected with this, the larynx was formed with delicate etheric substances. Now gradually human language could be developed. Through a fourth etheric stream, an organ was developed between the eyebrows at the root of the nose. And only through this organ did the human being awaken to self-consciousness. Before that point, he or she had only self-feeling. If you now direct your attention firmly and energetically always to one of the 4 points only, namely to the root of the nose, or to the larynx, or to the hands and arms, or to the entire surface of the body, and connect this exercise with a very specific word that can only be conveyed from mouth to mouth, from teacher to pupil. Then you will come into contact with a corresponding etheric stream that called forth the transformation in the human body. Esoteric schooling consists above all in this, that we become aware of the processes that are working unconsciously on our body. We are to enter into a conscious connection with the forces of the cosmos. If one crosses one's hands so that the right hand lies over the left and then concentrates on the hands that have been so crossed in connection with a very specific word, then one will soon notice that both hands strive to separate and that one's arms spread apart entirely on their own. If the exercise is done often enough, and with great energy and endurance, this is the position of medieval saints. This exercise also has its special significance. There are etheric streams that always circulate out of the cosmos through the human body. When such stream enters through the head and proceeds from there into the right foot, then into the left hand, then into the right hand, then into the left foot, and from there back into the head. Think of the human being in the position just described, standing with stretched arms. Then the stream has the form of a pentagram, and there's a picture. It would be bad for human beings if the stream did not enter into them through the head, but rather through the feet. All bad influences enter into the human body through the feet. Black magicians make use of this fact. But this stream circulates in human beings not only when they are in this special position, but rather always. Also when the hands are folded together or when a leg is bent. There are 5 different etheric vibrations through the human body. One of them also circulates in solid matter and is therefore called in quotes earthly because it can also penetrate the solid earth. The 5 streams are called Tattvas, spelled T-A-T-T-W-A-S. The earthly Tattva is also called Prithvi Tattva. One can also see it if, when exhaling, one breathes in a very special way onto a smooth mirror. Assuming that all the preconditions have been fulfilled in the appropriate way, and one can see the form in which the Tattva flows. On the mirror, a square is shown, or rather actually, only the 4 corners. One can also taste the Tattvas if one's attention is directed in a certain way to the tip of the tongue. Prithvi Tattva tastes sweet. Similarly, one can see the Tattvas. Prithvi Tattva looks yellow. The second etheric stream is called Apas Tattva, labeled as such because it can no longer circulate in the earth but still in water, in fluid. Tejas Tattva still circulates only in the air, and that is not what we call air today. Vayu Tattva is still finer. The finest stream is Akasha Tattva. That is the substance of which our thoughts are woven. The form of this Tattva consists of 2 spirals that are constantly intertwining. And again, the Prithvi Tattva. It looks like a square with the sides cut out, so just the corners. It's sweet and yellow. The Apas Tattva is a crescent moon shape, and its taste is tart. This color is white. Tejas Tattva is spicy and red and is a triangle. Vayu Tattva is sour and green and is a circle. And Akasha Tattva is bitter, dark blue-black, and is 2 intertwining spirals. These 5 streams are constantly circulating in human beings and bring them into connection with the entire cosmos. The being of humans is woven from spirit. We are born out of the spirit, descended into matter and streaming back to the spirit. These streams that were active in us when we descended into matter we should now become conscious of. We are going back the same path that we came down, but now consciously. There is no other true development. What we are already now enkindling through these exercises will be developed by the whole of humanity only in the 6th root race. In occult science, a root race means 1 day of creation. We are preparing the 6th day of creation. We are in the dawn, of the sixth day of creation. The descent into the spirit, life in matter, and the return to the spirit is represented in 3 letters. Om. The end of record A, record B. Our point of departure is a description of the meditative exercises that many of us have already had and others not yet. To this end, Dr. Steiner spoke of concentrating on various points when meditating. In particular, in the exercise, concentrating on a point between the eyebrows at the root of the nose, then the larynx, then the arms and hands, with a meditative sentence that is given to the pupil by the teacher. This meditation was related to the fact that the physical body was first formed by the etheric body, and the etheric body formed and permeated the physical organs. A later exercise would be to lay the right hand over the left and to guide the streams in the form of a pentagram, from the root of the nose through the body. That is, from the head to the right foot, left arm, left foot, and back to the head. The human being would be the pentagram, and the streams would be guided through his body. If the exercise is done very intensively, then one's arms spread themselves out involuntarily so that the human being creates a cross. However, it would not be necessary for the body to be held in the position of the lines of a drawn pentagram. The etheric organs would not be stiff, but rather flexible and bendable, and follow the body's bend. A black magician guides the streams, instead of beginning at the head, from the feet into the body, and thereby achieves an entirely different effect through the fact, let the lower forces stream into the human being. For this reason, a white magician will never start anywhere other than the head. The pentagram which is open. Close parenthesis. Another exercise is the breathing exercise, which everyone wanting occult development had to go through. Dr. Steiner went back to the times when human beings were similar to jellyfish and lived in a fluid similar to water, which consisted of the same semi-fluid substance as they themselves. That is, before humans were enclosed in skin. Thank you. When they were the same as their environment, gradually the human being evolved into his or her present form. An important step in evolution is the time in which human beings learned to walk upright and formed arms and hands out of the instruments for forward movement. The human being is distinguished from everything that is animal through the use of arms and hands for work, for activity, as well as through upright posture. In this way, the larynx and lungs were gradually formed and humans began the activity of breathing as they now practice it. Now there are various degrees of what the human being inhales. If someone who is already further developed breathes on the surface of a mirror when exhaling, then they will be able to make all kinds of observations. Everything that now surrounds us as that which we call air is termed air. Earthly equals Prithvi Tattva, then second comes the watery, which is in the esoteric sense. Watery equals Apas Tattva, then the airy, in the esoteric sense. Fiery equals, then a still finer substance, Vayu Tattva, and finally, as the finest substance, Akasha Tattva. That is the matter out of which thoughts are woven. Readers aside, I've been saying I think it's Tejatava, sorry, end of readers aside. The individual Tattvas also have forms, flavor, and color, which are as follows. And again, those are the same as I read previously. All of these Tattvas permeate the body. When humans are further developed, the etheric streams become visible to them. What is still hidden to ordinary humans, what they will only attain when the sixth root race is completed, can already be achieved by those who wish to evolve quickly. Now, in an age that is called the dawn of the sixth root race by the masters of the White Lodge, we live in the fifth subrace of the fifth root race. But the dawn of the sixth root race is already breaking. The words that have been given us concerning this by the masters are translated into German as follows. The words, please, end of record B, this is record C. There are 5 different etheric streams in the human body. One of these also circulates through solid substance and is therefore called because it can penetrate the solid mineral elements in occult terms. The earthly tattva is called. One can also see it if one allows one's breath to flow onto a smooth mirror in a special way when exhaling. Then, assuming all the preconditions have been appropriate, one sees the form in which this tattva flows. A square is shown on the mirror. One can also taste the tattvas if one directs one's attention to the tip of the tongue. One can also see them. If one closes one's eyes, one sees the colors. Not the complementary colors of the external world, but they often change themselves into the complementary colors by themselves. Close parenthesis, the stream of Apas Tattvas circulates not only in the earthly but also in water, that is in everything fluid. Speaking esoterically, but also in the blood. The third stream, Tattvas, circulates only in the air, that is, esoterically speaking, in the air. Vayu is still finer, and Akasha is the finest of all. That is the substance out of which our thoughts are woven. The form of this Tattvas is two spirals that are constantly intertwining. These 5 streams are constantly circulating in human bodies and bring them into connection with the cosmos. Esoteric lesson given in Hamburg on November 18, 1906. Very short. Notes from Amelie Wagner concerning the pentagram and the 5 streams. Significance of concentration on the astral senses. The earthly senses receptive. The astral senses active out of themselves. That's the end of that esoteric lesson. This is an esoteric lesson given in Cologne on December 1, 1906. Manuscript from Anna Weissman. One of the most important guiding principles for esotericism, as it is given to the pupil through the teacher from the masters of wisdom and the harmony of feelings, is as follows, quote, "Learn to keep silent and power will come to you. Give up power and the ability to will come to you. Give up willing and the feeling will come to you. Give up feeling and knowledge will come to you." Close quote. Esoteric pupils must place this principle before their souls in all their actions and deeds. Then one day they will experience the truth of these verses themselves. However, one does well to bear in mind that these different forces can only be acquired one after another. That is, one can never first acquire knowledge, and then somehow feeling, and then willing, and then power. Rather, from relinquishing power, willing arises. An example can be brought forward here from the life of a rich Englishman, Oliphant, who, in the middle of the past century, lived in England and owned a very large fortune. He was inspired by a noble love for his needy fellow human beings. And from this feeling, he and his wife, who was filled with the same feelings, distributed their entire wealth to the poor and emigrated to America equipped with the barest necessities. There they worked to acquire a modest means, and with this means they moved to Mount Tabor. Here, a strange appearance came to light with them. Oliphant began to write several highly interesting and peculiar books concerning Genesis by means of the inspiration that his wife had from the Spirit. Altogether, from a purely occult point of view, these books represented the strangest things that anyone at that time wrote about the Bible. However, only with the help of his wife was he in a position to have these thoughts. After an intensive life of spiritual knowledge, his wife died first. Oliphant was able to continue his work only for a short time after the death of his wife. Then the ability to write disappeared entirely, since the inspiration of his departed wife no longer reached the physical plane. This is an example of the truth of the second line of the verse listed above. Let me read that just to get that back in our heads. Give up power, and the ability to will come to you. Okay, now back to Steiner. In the world that surrounds us, everywhere on the earth, we are constantly surrounded by 5 etheric streams. In the sense of the Rosicrucian schools, the etheric streams are characterized as follows: Earth's ether, water ether, fire ether, air ether, and thought ether. The corresponding Indian terms are Prithvi Tattva, Apas Tattva, Tehas Tattva or Agni Tattva, Vayu Tattva, and Akasha Tattva. Just as these ether streams are constantly present in the nature that surrounds us now, so they are also active in a very specific way in humans. The Earth's ether goes from the head to the right foot. From there, the water ether goes to the left hand. Then from the left hand, the fire ether goes to the right hand. From there, the air ether goes to the left foot, and from there, the thought ether goes back to the head. In this way, the following figure arises, and he shows a pentagram. This is the pentagram of esotericists. The holy pentagram, the sign of the human being. Its point is pointed upward, which thereby indicates that the spiritual streams to the human being out of the height. Everywhere in nature where we find symmetrical order based on the number 5, for example, in flowers, the pentagram is present. If we turn the pentagram around so that the point is directed downward, then we call this the sign of black magic. By means of the point, black magic draws the lower, detrimental forces of the earth to itself. And then, by means of their evil will, black magicians send these detrimental influences out into the world through the 2 horns above, in order to make the forces of nature and the soul serve their evil purposes in an egotistical way. There's another picture. In what follows, several especially notable characteristics and relations between the etheric streams are listed in a table. We find there, in cross-section, the 5 different streams, their relationships to taste, to color, etc. Through betrayal, several of these special characteristics have been published. However, one heard there the bells ringing but without hearing the symphony. The cross-section form of thought, ether akasha tattva, is presented in an entirely false and misleading way. It was said there that this figure is similar to an ear. As a matter of fact, this is not the case. It is rather a dark blue swirl into which another, less visible swirl entwines. Since this second swirl is not clearly visible, the opinion arose that the cross-section of akasha tattva forms the figure of an ear. But this is the true form, and there's a picture. And the chart which I will not read. End of that esoteric lesson. Esoteric lesson given in Berlin, December 18, 1906. Record A is a manuscript from Matilda Scholl, Anna Weissman. Record B are notes from Matilda Hoyer. Record C is a manuscript from Camilla Wandry. Record A. Today we want to consider the being of the three logoi more closely. Many theosophists speak inaccurately about these things at the beginning. When they know little about theosophy, this can lead to confusion and injury. Actually, there is no human being in whom higher consciousness has not awakened, who can imagine the being of the three logoi. Nevertheless, by calling forth the appropriate images, one can prepare the soul for proper clairvoyance in the future. Everything spiritual also expresses itself in the physical world. So we want to consider what in the physical world corresponds to those lofty powers. In ordinary life, one says that the human being has 5 senses. Esotericism names only 3: smell, taste, sight, sense of warmth, hearing. Taste and sense of warmth lie between these. When I smell something, I am taking very fine particles of the substance in question into my nose. Therefore, with the sense of smell, I am perceiving matter itself. When I see with my eyes, I am not perceiving the object itself, but only a picture of the object that is called forth by a chemical process in the eye. Taste lies in the middle between smell and vision. It is an in-between sense. When I taste, I do indeed take part of the object itself into myself, but I do not perceive this part directly, as with smell. I must rather first undertake a chemical process with it, in order to taste it. With hearing, I do not perceive any object, but rather vibrations in the air. I also perceive certain vibrations when I feel warmth. But then my entire body is perceiving, whereas in hearing, the perception of vibrations takes place in a very special organ formed for it. The three logoi are related to these 3 senses. The third logos is so selfless that it lets its being sound through the world. The second streams forth in pictures. However, the first logos lets itself stream forth its own body. That signifies the highest degree of selflessness, when a being is able to allow its own being to flow forth. At the beginning of the world, the first logos began to let its being stream forth. The universe was filled, so to speak, with a fragrance. The aroma of the world would be the first logos for us. Everything material took its origin from it, from its body. The second began to stream forth and interwove the aroma of the world with pictures and forms. Then the world began to form. Light and color lit up. The third sounded through the evolving world. The aroma of the world flooded through space. Majestic forms shone forth, and sounds of the third logos pulsated through this shimmering, fragrant world. We can now understand the entire world surrounding us as the pouring forth of the three logoi, and thereby gradually penetrate to their true being. Now, not every one of the three logoi works by itself alone, but rather they live and weave in one another, so that any one of the 3, at any given time, is expressed in the other 2. But the effects of each of the 3 are not immediately clear to our perception. That is connected with the time of their pouring forth. As our planet series came to light, the streaming out of the third logos began, and its tone will only finish sounding when our planet series will have achieved the end of our evolution. But the waves of the other 2 did not first stream only at the beginning of our world series. They have come to us from earlier world developments. The waves flowing forth from the other logoi did not stream forth for the first time only at the beginning of our world series. They have come to us from earlier evolution of the world. The flowing waves from both of these last longer than those of the third logos. Yet before our planet series reaches its goal, the radiating of the second logos will have ceased, and a new one begun. This new streaming forth is what actually belongs to our planetary system that we are working on. The new radiation of the second logos is prepared long before it fully streams forth. Such preparatory streams were what the great religious founders, Buddha, Zoroaster, Hermes, etc., brought into the world. However, when the light of the second logos shone again for the last time, it shone the brightest. And that was in Jesus Christ. When it now shines again, it is the second Logos itself who radiates forth his being anew. The wave streaming forth from the first Logos is even longer than the wave from the second. When the new Logos has long since flowed away, the first will have ceased sounding and begun its new radiating, which only then will actually belong to our planet series. The third Logos will be mostly clearly perceptible to us. It sounds forth fully and loudly, and if we want to characterize its being, we say that it has a bright, vowel-like sound. Just as in each of the three logoi, the other two are also perceptible. So too, the first and second logoi are sounding forth together in the third. Similarly, the first and third logoi radiate as pictures in the second, and in the first Logos, the second and third stream forth as fragrance. To begin with, however, only the interaction of the first and second in the third Logos is recognizable to us. When we can hear the bright, full awe of the third Logos, there is yet another sound resonating with it. The sound of the second Logos. But our second Logos is still evolving. For that reason, its tone is still muffled. Nevertheless, a full vowel like ooh, our first Logos, which will arise only in the distant future, sounds like a gentle humming undertone. Its tone is not vowel-like. It is still too far away for that, but rather a muffled consonant. Hence, we have the sound of the loftiest powers expressed in Eam. That is the goal we are all striving toward. To participate in the being of these lofty, holy powers of the world. The human soul has value for the evolution of the world only to the extent that it partakes in these powers. There's a picture. The first and second Logos resonate with the third Logo. The third Logos tone is entirely on the physical plane. We can create the tone, give forth from us, and receive it. End of Record A, Record B excerpts, and it begins with a chart, which, again, I won't read. Steiner, or the person who recorded this, long before the new radiating forth of the first Logos, fully sent forth the world fragrance. It was being prepared. Its development took place on an earlier Manvantara, and only the remnants of that evolution reach into ours as far as the sun. The second Logos lights world of light. Christ, with its development, which also occurred in an earlier Manvantara, reached into our Manvantara up to earth. Then the evolution of a new Christ began in the form of Krishna, Zoroaster, Hermes, Buddha, Moses, parentheses. There's 2 question marks in parentheses there, and formed its continuation in Christ Jesus. See the events of Pistis Sophia and the Twin Redeemers. Manuscript comment. Close parenthesis. The third Logos phone is entirely on the physical plane. We can create the tone from ourselves and receive it. The third Logos, parenthesis, harmony of the spheres. World tone, close parenthesis, began its evolution on our Saturn and will be perfected with the Vulcan incarnation. With our Manvantara. What the first Logos world fragrance casts off from its being in the course of its evolution is incarnated in all the evil spirits, who, as is already stated in myths and sagas, spread an evil aroma. And this descends into the 8th kingdom. The less evil beings who are incarnated in what was cast off from the evolution of the second Logos are the opposite of the spirits of light, the spirits of darkness. Only the kingdom of the third Logos tone can human beings take into themselves and then send back outside of themselves. Indeed, by receiving sound through hearing, and then by means of the larynx, sending the sound back into the world again. What human beings have received through the light, the pictures of the external world which they have taken into themselves through their eyes, they will later be able to set back into the world as pictures, as forms, through the pineal gland. Indeed, through their etherized blood that will then have been brought under the control of their will. They will then be more selfless. They will no longer take oxygen, which plants give to them today, into themselves from outside, but rather they will generate the oxygen within themselves. The blue blood that goes into the heart they will produce within themselves, without breathing in air from outside, and this they will give up for the creation of pictures and forms. And later yet, when they will have become even more selfless, they will be in a position to give up their own substance and create beings out of it. And then, by means of the mucous glands that are located close to their pineal gland, they will be able to set them out of themselves. There's a picture of the Saturn, Sun, Moon, Earth, Jupiter, Venus, Vulcan, and some more charts, and direct record B. I will say this record C again has many of a picture of much of what Steiner just said, and too much to read, but I will then go past the picture, and the last thing, then in this year. All 3 are contained in each of the 3 logoi. A shadow image of each is contained in its substance in the other. And that is the end of Record C and the end of this section, the reading which finishes up the year 1906. This is a reading of Collected Works 266, the first of 3 volumes by Rudolf Steiner, entitled From the Esoteric School. Esoteric Lessons from 1904 to 1909. I'm beginning now in this. I believe this is the 12th section of the reading, and I'm beginning the year 1907. So this is the first esoteric lesson from Stuttgart, January 20th, 1907. Manuscript from Alice Kinkel. Retrospection. In retrospection, we place ourselves into what was experienced in such a way that we properly feel the difference between our experience and the soul and the real experience in the external world. That is, as if we were to observe the picture of a landscape with our eyes closed. That is, a memory compared to a real observation with eyes open. That is a direct beholding. That is the same relationship as the one between memory and retrospection. Memory is remembering, and retrospection should be beholding in this case. Memory gradually disappears with initiates, and a direct beholding of what one wants to remember takes its place. One must imagine a picture before oneself of the day's events, exactly and clearly with all the details. Shirt, face, manner, etc. Everything exactly, and thus see the events in a picture. How someone spoke, what was done, etc. It is very important to call up into one's memory the small events that are not very interesting that cost effort to remember, because in this way one's inner forces are stimulated. The power of imagination is created by exercising the capacity for forming mental pictures. The completeness of the experience is not important, but rather the clarity of the images. With all this work, no muscles are to be strained, as the light first had to form the external eyes, and the body received the stimulation for creating other organs. Now it is obligated to pass this on further to the astral body. This happens through all the activity of the physical body. Everything in the physical body is formed from outside, also the stomach and other inner organs. Thus, the organs of the astral body are formed through imagining pictures. The auxiliary exercises again. We must begin here with thinking and continue until we achieve our goal of the feeling in question appearing. We must then pour this feeling into the body, and thus practice this exercise for a month or longer, before continuing on to the second, and so on. Through this inpouring, the astral body acquires consistency, a firm shape, backbone. The first of these auxiliary exercises is control of thought. One takes an object and attempts to think about it for 5 minutes. Then a certain feeling must appear, which one then pours into the body. The less interesting the object is, the more useful it will be, since holding on to it in thought for 5 minutes will cost effort. The second is initiative in one's actions. It must be an action that one forces oneself to do. Third, overcoming pain and pleasure. Not that we do not feel joy or suffering, but rather that we do not allow them to rule us. Fourth, positivity in everything. Fifth, freedom from bias in all experiences. Sixth, repeat all 5 exercises rhythmically. Each of these auxiliary exercises is to be carried out until one can pour the corresponding feeling into the body and experience it. Only then should one proceed to the next month. Meditation. As a first task in the morning, meditation is given to you. It is intended to awaken powers. The lily is a visible expression of a word once spoken by the Creator. A great deal depends upon which words, which vowels are spoken, which thoughts, which feelings one sends out into worlds, because they will become visible at a time in which the earth will be in another state, in Venus and Jupiter states. Thus, what the 3 kingdoms of nature are here on the earth is the expression of what the inhabitants of the moon once spoke and thought. For this reason, the mantras, also the words of meditation, are chosen in their wording and sequence of letters just as they are, because they have their effect only in such a sequence. What is done and created by us will one day be visible on Jupiter. For example, the cathedral in Cologne, Raphael's masterpieces, music, etc. The cathedral in Cologne will be visible as a grown formation. Raphael's paintings will be similar to Fata Morgana, as clouds surrounding Jupiter. Music will sound forth on Jupiter as music of the spheres. In our exercises we must think that the masters have intended something of this sort for us. That is the purpose of the exercises. And the verse quote, "In the spirit lay the seed of my body," explains this to us. The old adepts in Atlantis expressed this succinctly in the holy word Awe is the past and sounds distinct and clear. Is a muffled vowel and represents the present. The clarity of the past and the freedom of the present to act are contained within it. Is the undetermined quality of the future, to which every vowel, this or that action, can be adapted. Retrospection done properly awakens a powerful force in the soul that humans will need when they can one day ascend to the astral plane. From control of thoughts, the mastery of thought should arise. From initiative in one's actions, a drive toward work, toward activity should appear which one otherwise had not felt. Meditation should be the first work of the day in the morning. That is the end of that esoteric lesson. The next esoteric lesson is from Berlin, January 29, 1907. Record A is a manuscript from Matilda Scholl and Anna Weissman. Record B. Manuscript from Camilla Wandry and Anonymous. Record A. Because several are here today who have never attended an esoteric lesson, we want to try to better understand the exercises we all must do. First, we want to speak of the morning meditation and become clear on the effects of meditation. Streams of spiritual life are always flowing through the world. But when we are occupied with the thoughts of everyday life, those streams cannot flow into us. Our words of meditation are like doors, like gates that should lead us into the spiritual world. They have the power to open our souls so that the thoughts of our great leaders, the masters of wisdom and harmony of feelings, can stream into us. However, for this to happen, the deepest stillness must reign in us. We must be clear that meditation is a most intimate undertaking of the soul. Thus, immediately after awakening, when no other thoughts have yet passed through the soul, we should allow the words of meditation given to us by our teacher to live in our soul. However, we should not regard them as content for speculation and philosophizing. Indeed, we should reflect on their meaning and significance as little as possible. We have time for reflection the entire rest of the day. We should keep that far away from meditation. Neither should we repeat the words in a meaningless fashion. But we should be clear that these words open our souls to the inflowing of divine beings as a flower opens to let in the light of the sun. Lofty spiritual beings stream down to us. Above all, however, the thoughts of those whom we call Master. We want to be clear that it is they above all who guide us and are near to us in meditation. We should also know that they walk on the earth incarnated in physical bodies. Thus, we should allow the words of meditation to live in our soul without pondering. We should rather attempt to grasp the spiritual content of the words with our feelings and to permeate ourselves with them. The power of these words lies not only in the thoughts that are expressed, but also in the rhythm and sound of the words. We should listen for that. And when we have also excluded everything sensory, we can say that we should wallow in the sound of the words. Because the sound of the words is so important, it is not an easy matter to translate a meditative verse into a foreign language. The meditative verses we have received in the German language have been brought to us directly out of the spiritual world. Every set form of words, every prayer, has its greatest effect in its original language. When Indians want to express their greatest devotion for the God who reveals himself in the three logoi, they summarize their feeling in three sayings. These sayings characterize the activity of the three logoi. In English, these three sayings are primal truth, primal goodness, infinitude, O Brahma; primal blessedness, eternity; primal beauty, peace, blessings; oneness, Om, peace, peace, peace. But the entire fullness of spiritual power is only given if the words are said in Sanskrit, the original language, especially when they are spoken out loud. Then one can hear how even the air is resonating with the words they are. And my apologies for trying this. Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma Anandarupam Amritam Bibharti Shantam. Shivam Advaitam Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. It is exactly the same with the Lord's Prayer. Spoken in the German language, it is almost only the underlying thought that is effective. The Latin Pater Noster is already more effective, but the entire force and fullness comes to expression only in the original Aramaic language. Thus we should listen our way entirely into the sound of the word. But we should also refrain from all spatial images. We should stay with the impressions that are directly connected with our senses. In ordinary life, our thoughts are so empty and without content. We should bring life to our mental pictures. For example, with the word scoop. We have a mental image as vividly graphic as possible, such as when someone scoops up water with his or her hands. All of our thoughts should be as full of content as pictorial as possible. Now, when meditating, the words of meditation should acquire inner life. However, we should also exclude our conceptions of space and adhere entirely to the meaning. That means that the spatial way of seeing exists only on the physical plane, but not in the astral world. However, everything connected with the senses, color, light, sound, smell, and so forth, is also present in the astral world. For that reason, when meditating, we should seek to awaken a content-filled sensual mental picture as clearly as possible. Spiritual beings express themselves in everything that the senses perceive. Their being streams to us in colors, sounds, and smells, and when we connect ourselves with certain sense impressions, certain beings flow into us. The first logos streams to us as world aroma, as a clearly perceptible smell. A spiritual being of a higher or lower nature lives in every smell. Very good, lofty beings live in incense. They draw us up directly to God. Beings of lower order are incarnated in musk fragrance. In earlier times, when people understood even more about these things, one used musk to stimulate lower sensuality. Thus, spiritual beings also live in sounds and colors. And we should feel through and through the words of meditation in our souls as colorfully, as light-filled and sound-filled as possible. We should live entirely within them. For example, if a meditation begins in pure rays of light, close quote and so forth, then one should have a clear, light-filled mental picture. One should see and feel how the streams of light flood down upon one. Then it must still be said that it is not at all important for us to receive new exercises as fast as possible. On the contrary, the power in the soul of humans is shown when they remain with an exercise for the longest possible time, when they are able to draw power from it for a long time. Every meditation is filled with power for which a long time is required in order to awaken the slumbering forces in the soul. However, when one is always longing for new instructions, then one destroys the power of the exercise and kills its fruit. There are certain elementary esoteric schools where the pupils receive very simple instruction. These do not lead to any goal, but we can learn what such simple exercises can have for an effect when they are properly done. For example, the pupil gets the task to think only on a single mental picture for a quarter hour. Glass, glass, bless. This is not laughable. For if during this period of time the pupil really manages to exclude every other thought from his or her soul, then his or her soul will become entirely empty and pure, and the forces slumbering in the soul will awaken. Unless other influences are too strong, thus we see that such simple exercises can also be effective. Nevertheless, such exercises are not given in our school. Our meditations contain powerful spiritual forces. They are gates into the spiritual world. The further pupils advance, the simpler the exercises that they receive become. The exercises become simpler and simpler. The more the spiritual forces awaken. Now we also want to talk about evening retrospection. Every evening before going to sleep, we should go back through our day from the end to the beginning. The day should pass us by in pictures. One thing is important in doing this, namely, that we never allow a feeling of regret to arise. Regret is always egotistical. Those who regret wish themselves to have been better. They have an entirely egotistical wish. We should learn from our daily life. When we have done something bad, we should not regret, but rather think. At that time, I was not able to act otherwise. Now, however, I can do it better and want to do it better in the future. With each experience of the day, we should ask ourselves, did I do it rightly? Should I not? Should I have not done it better? One will always find that one could have done it better. In doing this, one thing is very important, that we learn to look upon ourselves as a stranger, as if we observed and criticized ourselves from the outside. Altogether, we should get a mental picture of the day as clearly as possible. It is much more important to remember small details than important incidents. A general who has fought a great battle immediately has a picture of the battle before his or her eyes that evening. That sticks in his mind by itself. However, all the little details of the day, for example, how he put his boots on and took them off, he no longer knows. And this is what is important, that we have a picture of the day as complete as possible. For example, we see ourselves walking down the street, and we try to remember how the rows of houses went, which window displays we walked past, which people met us, how they look, how we ourselves look. Then we see ourselves going into a shop and remember which sales associates came to meet us, what they wore, how they spoke and moved. We must try very hard to remember such small details. This strengthens the forces of the soul. One must not think that one needs an hour for this. At first, one will remember little, and then gradually, with great effort, more and more. Finally, however, one can with practice reach the point where the entire life of the day can pass through the soul like paintings on a wall, clearly and with all details in 5 minutes. However, one must strive patiently. For those who quickly repeat the events of the day only superficially, registering them without color, this exercise is of no use at all. What should be intended through this exercise is as follows. If we have walked a long path, and at the end of the path would once again like to know the way we have come, we can do so in two ways. First of all, we could stand with our backs to the path just traveled and attempt to remember what lies behind us. We can, however, also turn around and survey the path. Now, when we have traversed a period of time, to begin with, we can only think back with our memory and not look back at the interval of time that has passed. But this looking back, which we know only in space, is also possible in time. And we can learn to do it by trying to let the day that has just ended pass through our consciousness clearly and as graphically and concretely as possible. No event of the past is entirely gone. It is still present in what we call the Akashic Chronicle. Only in this way does one learn to read it. At first one only recognizes within it what concerns oneself, gradually what concerns others. For this reason, the evening retrospection is such an important, indispensable exercise. Esoteric pupils can observe something strange about themselves. They can notice that their memories constantly become worse and worse. This is entirely natural, but it will soon get better or more accurately. Memory will disappear, and something new will take its place. The new faculty will be the ability to see the past directly. Then one no longer needs an ordinary memory. Aside from meditation and retrospection, pupils must do certain auxiliary exercises. They are intended not to develop new capacities, but rather to strengthen the character of their soul and to shape it into the proper form. Only when these auxiliary exercises are done can the success of meditation be beneficial. The first auxiliary exercise is this, that once a day, when we have a few moments undisturbed, we take a thought, place it in the center of our thoughts, and remain with it for at least 5 minutes. When one begins to do this exercise, one should choose the simplest, apparently empty mental picture possible, and think through in a calm sequence everything that can be thought about it and in connection with it. If one chooses an interesting object, then thoughts will attach themselves to it. However, if one chooses, for example, a matchstick, then one must make great efforts to continue reflecting on it for a longer period of time. And it is just this effort that awakens the forces in the soul. One can think here somewhat as follows. How does a matchstick look? What different kinds of matchsticks are there? How are they made? What are they good for? How are they stored? What kind of damage can they do? And so forth. If one does this exercise, then after a time one will feel an inner certainty and stability. After the exercise, this is a very specific feeling. One tries to become very conscious of it. And then, as if it were water, pour it onto the head and spinal cord. One must do this exercise daily, at least for 4 weeks. However, one can also do this exercise for months, until one feels that it is bearing good fruit. Secondly, we should practice initiative in action. To this end, one chooses actions that one otherwise would not have done, and that are undertaken only for the sake of this exercise. Exercises as simple as possible, to which one must force oneself, are the most effective for the beginning. Again, one soon notices a certain feeling, a stability, and the drive to initiate action. One should guide this feeling in full consciousness and pour it like water from the head down into the heart. In order to embody it entirely, one does not excise me. One does this exercise for a certain time, again at least for a week. In the 3rd month, or after the 2nd period, one begins to bring an end to all the swings in one's soul life, or, quote, jubilating heaven high, depressed until death, close quote, must disappear. No pain must be allowed to oppress. No joy must be allowed to lift one out of oneself. Fear, excitement, and agitation and discomposure must disappear. In this way, one creates a third feeling within oneself. This feeling of calm equanimity makes itself perceptible as an inner warmth. We concentrate this feeling in the heart and then let it radiate from there into our hands, into our feet, and then toward the head. After the 3rd period, one creates in the soul what one calls positivity. One tries to see the good and the beautiful in everything, even in the worst, most horrible, and ugliest things. As the Persian legend of Christ with the dead dog teaches us, here one will one day's sense of feeling of inner blessedness. This one concentrates in the heart, let it radiate to the head, and from there out through the eyes. In the 5th month, one practices never allowing one's future to be determined by the past. One must become entirely free of prejudice. One must take in everything with an open soul. If someone says the church tower over there was rotated during the night, then one must not laugh but rather think. Perhaps there is a law of nature that I do not know. Then one will soon sense a feeling as if something were streaming toward one from the space around one. This one absorbs, so to speak, through the eyes, ears, and the entire skin. In the 6th period, all 5 exercises should be done simultaneously in order to create a harmonious resonance. It should also be mentioned that one should try not to allow too great a time difference between the duration of the morning meditation and the duration of the evening retrospection. All those who wish to become true esotericists must be clear about the fact that they will achieve what all of humanity will one day achieve only in a shorter period of time. The idea must be firmly instilled in their minds that one day great tasks will come to them, that one day they will be needed for the further evolution of humanity. This thought, this goal must live deeply within them, otherwise they are not esotericists in the true sense. And when they develop in this way into the future, then their eyes will also be opened concerning the past, and then the present will be understandable from the future. The past, present, and future will thus be harmoniously united. The great masters place this also into the language in the holy syllable Aum. That is one of the many interpretations that can be given to this syllable. When we speak this syllable, the great masters are here with us, and the air resonates with the spiritual power of this sound. Readers aside, there's a chart here. I won't read it. It needs to be looked at. End of readers aside. Asuras, the beings that strive for the 8th sphere. They want to condense matter increasingly to press it together, so to speak, so that it cannot be spiritualized again, that is, led back to its original state. They are the dregs of the entire planetary evolution, which begins with Saturn and goes through the Sun, Moon, Earth, Jupiter, Venus, Vulcan. The Asuras already inhabit the moon and influence human beings, whom they wish to pull down into the 8th sphere and thus tear them away from progressive evolution and their goal, the Christ. All who are striving toward the 8th sphere will ultimately find their existence on a moon, in parentheses, Jupiter. Om. Invocation for defending against evil influences. Properly spoken, Aum connects people with creative divinity, the 3 logoi, against which no evil being who would like to pull humans away from God can stand. Aum must be spoken in one's consciousness. Archetypal self for whom everything has come forth. Archetypal self to whom everything returns. Archetypal self who lives in me. Toward you I strive. Peace, peace, peace. Om. Quote, in pain you shall bear children, close quote, is the symbolic saying that is related to humanity's progress through reincarnation whose ennobling is achieved through suffering. Humans redeem themselves and the Luciferic beings through true knowledge of Christ, through a wisdom that wants to understand an evolution of the earth, with Christ within, but only through a consciousness that wants to know Christ. If humans allow themselves to be unconsciously saved, then they contribute nothing to the salvation of Lucifer. You can be enlightened by the Holy Spirit, the new Spirit which is no other spirit than the Spirit by which Christ is understood. Lucifer is the bearer of the torch of this light, the light of Christ. He is the spirit who holds sway over the lodge of 12 as the 13. Manas is a spiritual self-consciousness in itself and divine consciousness when the human being unites it with Buddhi. Only the human being who has given birth to the higher self can do this. It is hidden in the Am. A is Atman. U is Buddhi. M is wisdom that leads the higher self to That is the end of that esoteric lesson. The next esoteric lesson was given in Hamburg on February 11, 1907. Record A is notes from Mathilde Hoyer. Record B notes from Amélie Wagner. Record A logos. Most people know little more than the fact that the word consists of 5 letters. Speaking about these lofty beings, about the 3 logoi, is often only an amateurish talking around the subject. In order to look into the world of the 3 logoi, an encompassing preparation is required to understand. But people often believe that they can understand the very highest truths right at first. In theosophical writings, the logoi are often spoken of as the fabric of life of the world. Such an understanding can only be impoverished compared to that to which we must raise ourselves if we wish to approach the world of the 3 logoi. In order to come to a certain understanding of what is meant with the logoi, quote, in the very beginning was the Word, the Logos, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Everything was made by the same, and without it, nothing of what was created came to be. Close quote. If we let this resonate in our soul, then we can sense that something most lofty and sublime has been touched. If we remember what is said concerning the evolution of the Earth, then we know that our planet has evolved out of another planet, Old Moon. On Old Moon, all the beings were different. The moon condition was also different from the present-day condition of our Earth. It was not solid, but in a fluid condition. Before the moon conditions, the sun itself was the incarnation of our Earth. And similarly, before that was the Saturn condition. Thus, our Earth is passed through 3 embodiments. Now, how is the present-day sun related to that planet which, before the moon conditioned, was the sun condition of our Earth? A promotion has taken place. The sun, which is now a fixed star, was formerly the sun planet. The best powers and beings have been distilled from this planet's sun, and those who are less developed then went on further with the moon, came to the Earth, and have carried out their evolution on the Earth. From every planet, one day a fixed star will evolve. Our Earth is not merely a dead body. It is an in-soul being. The souls that are incarnated in the 3 kingdoms of nature, human souls and yet higher spiritual beings, are united with our Earth. When a planet evolves into a fixed star, then the beings who are incarnated on the planet also ascend higher. The best forces and beings of the former sun had become a fixed star. When our Earth goes through the Jupiter and Venus conditions and is already almost sun, then human beings will be similar to the lofty beings that today inhabit the sun. And what will then become of our sun? From a sun, a zodiac evolves. When a sun has attained its maturity, then a structure is formed that we call a zodiac. Beings even more powerful and lofty than those from a sun are at work, sending down forces from a zodiac. The sun that is shining down upon us will one day shine down as the stars of a new zodiac. Creative beings of the highest evolution will be spiritual beings of this new zodiac, creative souls. When we consider human evolution, we see the organs that wither, that are at the end of their development. On the other hand, we also see others that stand at the beginning of their evolution. In the future, the heart will be a voluntary muscle. This evolution is happening while the Earth at the same time is being transformed from a planet into a sun. And what can our larynx do today? Through the spoken word, it can spread the thoughts in our soul into the world around us. Thoughts are first in our soul, then they are transformed through the spoken word into vibrations in the air. That is only the beginning of their development. What now serves as organs for human reproduction will wither, and the larynx will serve as the new organ of reproduction. Just as humans today incarnate their thoughts in vibrations in the air through speaking, so too in the future through speech, they will reproduce their kind through a new organ of reproduction, the land. This will occur when the Earth evolves from a planet to a sun, and from a sun to a zodiac. Then the human being will speak into the world, and the world will be created. Thus our world has come into being. Beings who have evolved through earlier worlds yet, before the Earth was Saturn, sounded forth the creative word when the Earth was at the beginning of its evolution. Quote, "In the beginning was the Word." Those quotes. At the end of evolution, humans will themselves be a creative logos. They will be beings that create through the Word. They have come forth from a creative logos and will later themselves be a creative logos. We speak of 3 logoi of that which we call the Trinity, the creative word, which is the 3rd logos. It is the sound of the world that sounds through the world from the beings that have become creative through the Word. When the Earth was at the beginning of its evolution, quote, "In the beginning was the Word," close quote. At the end of evolution, humans will themselves be a creative logos. They will be beings that create through the Word. They have come forth from a creative logos, and will later themselves be a creative logos. We speak of 3 logoi. You are a listener, the creative word which is the 3rd logos. It is the sound of the world that sounds through the world from the beings that have become creative through the Word. There are yet higher, loftier powers. They are the creative light. The human being will also one day be a luminous being. Warmth raised to a higher stage becomes light. All warmth is sacrifice. Humans will, in the distant future, not only be, in quotes, sound, they will evolve into a radiant, luminous being that is light. That lofty being that is creative for our being is the 2nd logos, which is the creative light. What goes through the world is the highest revelation. That is the aroma of the world. That is a principle of creation yet higher than the sound of the world and the light of the world. The tone of the world is the 3rd logos. The light of the world is the 2nd logos. And the aroma of the world is the 1st logos. That is the highest. When what is the highest creative force is transformed into its opposite, then it is something that destroys. Here we have the opposite of the aroma of the world. When the devil is given a bad odor in folk tales, that is to indicate the destructive being of the world. What always remains through all evolution is the eternal in the human being. That is called an esotericism, the personal aroma of the spirit of the human being. I'll read this small chart, left. I'll read the left side going down. Sound of the world, ear. Hearing in the physical, Saturn. Next to that, light of the world, eyes, psyche, in the etheric, sun. And between those two below is the word feeling. Now, the far right. In between the middle and the right is the word taste. At the bottom is on the right, aroma of the world, nose. Smell in the astral, moon. And that is the end of Record A, Record B. I want to try to hold on to some of what we have heard, so that perhaps when reading through it again later, a reminder of what was experienced will come alive. At first, Steiner tried to lead us deeper into the way we should meditate. We should imagine what we say as graphically as possible. We should not reflect on the words, for then we would find out only that which we already know. But rather we should look at the words and immerse ourselves in them. Then they will gradually say something to us. Through these exercises, we are making it possible for the divine beings higher above us, as well as the masters, our older brothers, to guide the streams of life that flow through the world into us. That is the purpose of the exercises. Quote, more radiant than the sun. Retrospection. To begin with, memory will suffer from these exercises. But do not worry, that is only a transition. Then one will look back, learn from what is experienced, without regret. Strictly speaking, regret would be a kind of egotism, vanity, and arrogance. One would gladly be better than one is. During retrospection, this feeling must be completely excluded. By means of this continuing conscientious exercise, we create an organ for the master that he needs in order to work in us. If we walk through a region and come to a rest, and want to survey the path we have walked, then we can do this in two kinds of ways. We can close our eyes and remember everything that went past us on the path. Or we can turn around and look back. This works on the physical plane. We know this in space, but not in time. What we need to learn is how to read the Akashic Chronicle, nature's memory. Everything we have done is stored there. Concerning the three logoi, if we want to arrive at a correct understanding of them, then we must create a sensory mental picture without speculating. The first logos is the smell or aroma of the world, of which earthly aroma is only a weak reflection. Into that the second logos was poured, the light, quote, I am the light of the world, close quote, literally, close parenthesis. All visible light, even sunlight, is only a weak reflection of the light that the second logos streams forth. The third logos is sound, the music of the spheres. We are more able to imagine the nature of sound because we ourselves have sound in language, in the sounds that come forth from our larynx. Thus, the ancient Turanian adept taught many thousands of years ago on Atlantis. The wide-open encompassing sound, the third logos. The muffled vowel, sound, the light, concerning which we still have no idea, the second logos. And the consonant M sound, the unspeakable, the aroma of the world, the first logos. That's the end of Record B, and that's the end of the first of 3 sections on the 1907 Esoteric Lessons. This is not conducive to chapters, so I'm reading it in sections. This is the second section of 3 sections of the 1907 Esoteric Lessons. And this is the esoteric lesson given in Munich on June 1st, 1907. Record A is a manuscript from Anna Weissman. Record B is a manuscript from Leela Harris and Anonymous. Record C is a manuscript from Alice Kinkle. Record D is a manuscript from Amelie Fuggs Blitz. Record A, my beloved sisters and brothers, you are all more or less advanced into an esoteric training. Today we want to become clear concerning the nature of such a training. An esotericist must be clear about the fact that he or she is always surrounded by invisible beings, those that ordinary people are unaware of. Just as we, for example, walk through the air, so too are we always walking through countless invisible beings. Wherever we may go, everything that surrounds us, is an expression of such beings. When we take a breath in, we are not only breathing in air, but at the same time a lofty spiritual being whose physical body is air, streams into us and fills our whole organism. When we exhale, this being again flows out of us. Now we should be conscious of this with every breath of air, that the divine spiritual being enters into us. And we should also be clear that we ourselves want to become such a being one day ourselves. The being that is incarnated in the air stands much higher than we do today. But it once stood where we stand now. In the time of Kamun, we will have evolved ourselves as far as this being. Now, if we are in an esoteric school, then the exercises, in whatever form they may be given, should bring it about that we acquire a vivid awareness of this in streaming spirit. What is it, then, that says I in us? That is the inhaled stream of air. It creates the red blood in us. And only because red blood flows through our body have we learned to say I. But a spiritual being influences us not only in the inflowing air, but everywhere in our body. In muscles, nerves, and bones, there are higher beings at work. However, one is not yet an esotericist just by knowing this. When I say to myself, in breathing, air enters me, then I am a materialist. When I know and recognize that a spiritual being flows into me with my breath, then I am a knower, but not yet an esotericist. But when I take in every breath filled with reverence, full of the deepest reverence for the divine being that is permeating my organism, when a lively feeling for this lofty being entirely fills me, then I am an esotericist. What does this being that is incarnated in the air do in me? He permeates my blood, filling my entire organism. So that, and in quotes, air body is formed, surrounded by bones, muscles, tendons, and so forth. I should become fully aware of this air body through the exercises. It is the same one who says capital I in me. If one does one's exercises with this understanding, then one is always becoming free, and it is as if an entirely new human being arises in one. Then one no longer says I to his or her bones, muscles, and tendons. Then one feels him or herself fully in this air body. In the spirit of the God incarnated in the air, one finds his or herself. What are humans actually doing when they do exercises? We must become very clear about this. When they are exercising, they are living the way one day in the future all human beings will live. During the time they are doing their exercises, esotericists are situated in a future state of humankind. In the future, all human beings will breathe, as the esotericists do when they are doing breathing exercises. But they will only do it under certain conditions. Only in a yet more distant future will it be natural for all human beings to breathe this way. But then the human body will have become very, very different. It will be such that it is entirely natural for it to breathe the way esotericists do for periods of time. What an esotericist does is an anticipation of what will happen later. In a certain sense, it is not yet time appropriate. The physical body is not yet equipped for it. Esotericists therefore rush ahead of their time and create into the future. But only in this way is progress possible. Our Earth could never evolve into the future unless there were people on it that already lived the way that all humankind will live only in the distant future. If there were no one on the Earth who wanted to do esoteric exercises, then the Earth would become increasingly rigid and hardened. Indeed, all human beings in Devacon work on transforming the Earth. However, if those incarnated on the Earth were only concerned to keep everything as it now is, and at the same time, those living in Devacam wanted to transform the Earth, then there would be no harmony in their working together. Humans living on the Earth would cause the Earth to ossify and rigidify completely. And through the working of those in Devacam who want to transform the Earth would ultimately split apart and be destroyed. For this reason, every esotericist must be fully aware what a holy obligation he or she is fulfilling when he or she does esoteric exercises. It is, of course, a contradiction of present-day conditions when an esotericist lives in a way that can only be natural in the future. But only in this way is progress possible. The human being must constantly use only a body that is possible and natural for the state of evolution. A being who, according to his spiritual development, belongs on Jupiter or Venus, in order to live among us, must make use of the physical body that we all have. However, in the spirit he leads a life that belongs to a distant, distant future. In this way, he or she gradually carries this future condition to us and makes it possible for this future to reach us. Now, someone could say, quote, couldn't humans go through such an evolution out of themselves without any esoteric school, close quote. Certainly they could do this. For every human being will, for example, in the course of his or her evolution, come to a transformation of the breathing process. But this is like someone saying, I want to learn mathematics entirely out of myself without a teacher. Then, such a person would have to forego any mathematics textbooks. Of course, one could learn mathematics in this way, but one would need approximately 3,000 years in order to learn something that one could learn with the help of a teacher in 5 months. In itself, it would be very possible, yes, certainly, that someone could find on his or her own the esoteric exercise he or she is now learning. For the exercises are all grounded in human nature. Only people would need not 3,000 years, but many hundreds of thousands of years. The path should be shortened by esoteric schools. They have no other purpose. By doing such esoteric exercises, humans grow spiritually into the future. They experience within themselves what one day will be in the future, and what they experience in this way is what we know as the higher worlds. They represent future conditions of humanity. Thus, in every moment we must be aware of our holy obligation to feel the God who flows into us with every breath. He streams into us when we inhale, but in exhaling we kill his body by making the air unusable. However, our exercises gradually teach us to breathe out air that is as pure as the air we breathe in. Those who do not want to learn this through exercises will naturally one day also achieve it. But they must wait until in the future the human body will have been so transformed that such breathing naturally results. Just as the present-day way of breathing results from today's constitution of the body. Today, air flows into and out of us and transforms expended blood into usable blood. Has it always been this way? No. There was a time when what is the warmth in our blood was not yet within us, but rather flowed into and out of our organism just as air does today. Just as the spirits of air flow through us today, at that time it was the spirits of fire. The human being then breathed warmth in and out, and just as red blood could be formed under the influence of the spirits of air, so at that time, when the spirits of fire worked in our organism, another substance flowed through all beings as the life fluid. Note: what flows in all beings today as milk, which nourishes their young, is a residue from that time. Only today the functions in the human body that are connected with milk are guided by other beings. When youthful humanity was being formed on the earth, for example, during the time of Atlantis and during the first races of our post-Atlantean peoples, the leaders who guided them were not yet human beings, but rather spirits of fire. For this reason, we must first establish a connection with them in our striving upward. But just as is still the case that not all people make equal progress forward, but rather, a portion always remains behind, so too was it the case back then. A portion of the spirits of fire remained behind the others, and then formed a resistance against the new evolution. The air and wind spirits had already begun their work among humans, taking over from the ancient fire spirits. When the fire spirits who had been left behind stood in their way, hindering their work. The Nordic saga gave people an idea of their being in the saga of the god Loki. He was such a, in quotes, fallen fire spirit who opposed the Old Norse gods. He is the one who brought about Baldur's death. Wotan, the blowing one, is a spirit of the wind. The ancient Nordic peoples felt him when they heard the raging storm, when they inhaled the wind into their body. These Nordic peoples were not without mysteries. We know how our post-Atlantean race poured forth from the west, from ancient Atlantis toward the east. As the mystery schools blossomed in Atlantis, they also remained preserved in the new main race or root race. First, the Indian second, the Persian third, the Chaldean, Babylonian, Egyptian, Semitic. Fourth, the Greco-Roman race. But not all the multitudes that came out of Atlantis migrated eastward all the way into this region. A portion remained in the west, in the region of today's Europe. It also had its mysteries, which were later developed into what we know as the Druidic and Troughton mysteries. But this Western culture did not remain separated from what was formed in the East. What gradually blossomed in the East developed its highest peak in what lies at the foundation of the wisdom of the Old and New Testaments. This came to the West as a mighty infusion, and united with what had quietly evolved here. This infusion was enormously beneficial. We must be clear about the fact that Atlantis is the source of all the wisdom of the East as well as of the West. Atlantis was a land that was enveloped in thick masses of water mist. These thick masses of water mist had a very specific relationship to human beings of that age, who felt something with these masses. They made their souls receptive for the language of God in the splashing of the springs, in the rustling of the leaves. The Atlanteans heard God speaking to them, and when they were lonely and quietly turned within, they perceived a sound as the voice of God, who spoke to them. They needed no laws or commandments. God himself told them what they must do, and the sound that sounded forth everywhere in Atlantis, and that echoed from the hearts of people in quiet hours of introspection, was later set as the Tao symbol in Egypt. This is also the original form of the cross. If we are now clear on how the masses of water mist back then created a connection with the divine, so that humans could directly receive and understand the wisdom of their God, then we now want to direct our gaze to the water that flows in our countries. When we see a drop of dew on grass sparkling in the light of the morning sun, then our heart becomes reverent, and this radiant drop of dew is a reminder for us, a reminder of those times in Atlantis when water, as mist, enveloped the land and the human being sensed the wisdom of the gods all around. The wisdom of Atlantis was incarnated in water, in dewdrops. Tao, our German word Tao, is nothing other than that ancient Atlantean sound. Thus we want to look upon every dewdrop with reverence and devotion as a holy legacy of that time, when the connection between human beings and gods was not yet broken. The Tao symbol, the ancient cross symbol, is called crux in Latin. And what is Tao? The dewdrop in Latin? Rose. Rose crux is our Rosenkreuz. Now we know its true significance. It is the Tao of Atlantis, the wisdom of Atlantis that flows to us today in drops of dew. The rose cross wants to say to us nothing other than this. It is a symbol for a new life that will blossom in the future in a spiritual way. Thus our northern race remained intimately connected to ancient Atlantis. It was different with those races that migrated east and evolved into the 4 subraces of the Indians, Persians, Egyptians, and Greco-Romans. They underwent an independent evolution. However, there is a law in the spiritual world that every race that independently struggles into the heights for a while must fall into ruin unless it receives a new infusion from those regions where it originated, those regions which were its motherland. Thus it was necessary for the lofty Eastern culture to receive an infusion from our regions to be melded with the spiritual intellectual cultures that had quietly been formed in our countries. That lofty spiritual individuality who recognized this was Christian Rosenkreuz. He was the one who, in the 13th and 14th centuries, undertook the great work of uniting the spiritual culture of the East with that of the West. He has always lived among us, and is still with us today as leader in the spiritual life. He brought the spiritual culture of the East, as it is represented in the Old and New Testaments as the highest blossom of Eastern wisdom, into intimate harmony with the wisdom that originated in Atlantis. Thus he gave us Christianity in the form in which it had been prepared and introduced by that mysterious, quote, unknown man from the Highlands, close quote, who came to Johannes Tauler. Highlands signifies the spiritual world, the kingdom of heaven. The lofty spiritual being who was concealed in the unknown man from the Highlands was none other than the Master Jesus himself, in whose body Christ once lived on earth. He, too, is with us today. The Master Jesus and the Master Christian Rosenkreuz prepare for us 2 paths to initiation, 2 invitations. The Christian Esoteric path and the Christian Rosicrucian path. Readers aside, I believe the word invitation should be initiation, but I'm not sure. End readers aside. Both of these paths have existed since the Middle Ages, but the spiritual life has increasingly disappeared from human consciousness with the rise of materialism. At the end of the 19th century, materialism had become so powerful that humankind needed a new spiritual infusion if it was not to perish. There was a single personality who, because of her psychic constitution, was able to receive the voice of the Master. This was H.P. Blavatsky. When she began her work, not all esoteric traditions had been lost. There were, rather, in the West, numerous brotherhoods that had received preserved esoteric wisdom, but in a rigid, ossified form, without vital life. When H.P. Blavatsky wrote her title, Isis Unveiled, they vociferously claimed that this wisdom belonged to them. For many of the symbols and teachings were known to them, and they sought to place hindrances in her path every way possible. Thus, H.P. Blavatsky was harassed in the worst way possible in an attempt to prevent her from fulfilling her work in a Christian esoteric sense, as was her original intention. Indeed, at that time she had to suffer through terrible things, and those esoteric brotherhoods actually managed to bring things to the point where she had to clothe what she had to say in Eastern dress. In her second work, titled The Secret Doctrine, even today we are still accustomed to having most terms for esoteric connections in Eastern language, but this Eastern form of wisdom is nothing for us Western people. It can only hinder us and bring us back from our goals. The people who are to form the kernel for the following races are here in the West. This should be given as a factual answer to what the voice of the masters from the East made known a short while ago. Our Western masters have also spoken, although less noisily, and we want to write deeply into our hearts what they said. They called upon us to work with them on the future evolution of humankind, and to stand firmly and endure in all the battles that yet stand before us, to hold firmly to what we possess as a living holy tradition. This call should always sound in our souls. However, no one should believe that there exists any disharmony between the masters of the East and the West. The masters always live in harmony. Nevertheless, in recent times, a decisive change has taken place with regard for the esoteric schools of the East and the West. Until now, both schools were united in a great circle under a common leadership of masters. Now, however, the Western school has made itself independent, and there now exist two schools on the same level, one in the East and one in the West. Two smaller circles instead of one great one. The Eastern school is led by Mrs. Annie Besant, and those who, in their hearts, feel themselves drawn to her can no longer remain in our school. Everyone should well consider for which path his or her heart longs. Two masters stand at the head of our Western school, the Master Jesus and the Master Christian Rosenkreutz, and they lead us on two paths, the Christian Esoteric and the Christian Rosicrucian. The Great White Lodge guides all spiritual movements, and the Masters Jesus and Christian Rosenkreutz belong to it. That would be an answer as a factual answer to the questions that many have asked themselves as a result of recent events. We are standing at the dawn of the sixth day of creation. We should evolve the sixth and seventh subraces out of ourselves. The future is already present in us, as a dog. Understanding that, receive what the Master Christian Rosenkreutz says to you. There follow the reading of the words of the Master. Record. That's the end of Record A. This is Record B. The entire human physical organism, this wonderful construction of the physical body with all its organs, bones, nerves, the glandular system, the blood circulation, would never have come about if spiritual beings had not been working on the human being throughout all of human evolution. Even now, spiritual beings are still continuously working on the human being. Such beings who are working on the formation of the human body were fire spirits on the moon. On the earth, they have given their warmth to humans. It has been transferred to humans' warm red blood. They themselves now live in the air. And when humans inhale air, they are inhaling these lofty spiritual beings. They are the beings who form the I in humans' capital by streaming into them in the air. This is portrayed for us in words, God blew the living odom into man, into his nose, and thus man became a living soul. Close quote. The air or wind god is Yahweh or Jehovah. Yahweh means the blowing one. The name Wotan means the same. That is also the one raging through the storm. It is the God whom humans inhale. The breathing process is not merely a physical process, but also a spiritual process. It must become a holy process for us as the air penetrates into us. God thereby creates a physical body in us. That is the branches of the breathing organism, which give God a physical organ within which he can work. We need to distinguish between the exoteric, materialistic understanding that sees only the physical process of oxidation in the inhalation of air and outer esotericism, which understands that a God is at work in the human being in the breathing process. Then there is inner esotericism. Inner esotericism is when we experience God within while breathing, when we experience divine being in all things. The physical body of the human being is not to be seen as his or her I, but rather the I lives in the inhaled air. The air that we exhale is deadly air that the God cannot use. Thus we kill the body of this God. In the future, the process of breathing will proceed in such a way that we ourselves transform the air within us, that we transform the air the way the world of the plants does. Gradually, people's breathing will change. All human beings will one day reach the point where they can breathe in an entirely different way. However, in order for this future condition to be brought about, some people must already begin to transform their breathing process. If no one were to begin doing this, then the future would not be brought about. Precisely through the fact that some people begin now with this transformation, is it possible that in the future other people will reach this place? We ourselves must bring this possibility about. What we recognize and practice in this way is not mere ancient wisdom, but wisdom of the future. If we go back into the distant part of this earth, then conditions were entirely different. Then the human being lived in Atlantis, a land of mists. The air at that time was permeated by masses of water and clouds of mist. A memory of this remained with our predecessors in the stories of Nibelheim. Our human predecessors lived in this water-drenched air. They were not yet taught about the world the way we are now, but wisdom itself dwelled in the air, that in the water, that filled the air. It sounded to them from the water. Everything in nature around them had a language that was perceptible to humans. In the rustling of leaves, in the rushing of the trees, in the babbling of the brooks, in the blowing wind, in the rolling thunder, in the splashing of the waves. They perceived a sound that told them of the wisdom of God. From all of nature surrounding them, a sound came toward them. The sound was the wisdom contained in the water, characterized by the Tao Te, the cross. There is a word for this also in our German language. Let us observe the drops of dew in the morning, the way they are gathered on the blossoms. The word dew, Tao in German, is the same term as the word Tao for that which the water of wisdom reveals to humans. The German word Tao indicates this. In Latin, Tau is called rose, and the cross is called crux. Rose crux means both together, the sign for Tau, the cross, and the dew on the plants. This is the esoteric significance of the exoteric sign for the cross, wound around with roses. A great multitude of people streamed from the west to the east after the age of Atlantis. Part of this mass of people remained in Middle Europe, another part pushed onto Asia and then southward. From this mass, the peoples of the following cultures derived: Indians, Persians, Babylonians, and Assyrians, the Greeks and Romans, the first 4 sub-races of the Indo-European main race. At first, culture went forth from them. But the same initiations that were introduced there also existed in Middle Europe among those who had been left behind. They were also initiating priests, who imparted the initiation that corresponded to the one in India, Persia, Egypt, Greece, and Rome. 5S were the Druids and the Trotten. In order for the evolution of humankind to continue, a new impulse had to occur after the 4 first subraces. The peoples of Middle Europe still had a memory of ancient Atlantean times, of the Tao wisdom, which had to be united with another wisdom, a stream that came from Eastern wisdom. That was the wisdom of the Old and New Testaments, which was brought by Christ Jesus. If this new impulse had not come, then stagnation would have entered, and humankind would have gone to its destruction. Thus, the wisdom of the Old and New Testaments was united through Christ Jesus with the Atlantean Tao wisdom. In 1459, it was Christian Rosenkreutz who recognized the necessity for the Tao wisdom to be united with Christianity for the bringing about of the new evolution. He brought the Tao, or Rose-Crookes wisdom, to the people of Middle Europe, which was united with the wisdom of the Old and New Testaments. At the time of Johannes Tauler, there lived a personality who was called the, quote, unknown man from the highlands, close quote. This personality taught Johannes Tauler, who then afterward preached so powerfully that some of the listeners were left as if dead. The individual who appeared in this personality, the unknown man from the highlands, was the individuality of the Master Jesus, who has always guided the evolution of the West, even if hidden. The other master individuality, Christian Rosenkreutz, worked together with this individuality in the West. They are now also the masters of the West, who are guiding evolution in Middle Europe. The Lodge of Masters forms a brotherhood. Nevertheless, the work that they do for the progress of humankind varies. Just as both of the other masters worked for the East, so these 2 masters work for the West. None of the scholars living in the West, in the last third of the 19th century, were suitable to convey the new spiritual infusion to the world, which the Great White Lodge recognized as necessary in order to protect the West from the downfall brought about by materialism. Nevertheless, in Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, the masters found the most suitable instrument for bringing the new teaching to the world, which is to bring about the future. H.P. Blavatsky wrote down the Western wisdom that was given to her at that time, entitled Isis Unveiled. This is a significant work containing great treasures of the highest truths, but they are in part presented as if in a great caricature. For this reason, H.P. Blavatsky was not understood at that time in the West. Also in the West, there are great occult brotherhoods, and many of them were not in agreement with what H.P. Blavatsky did. Among them, there arose a mighty persecution against her from which H.P. Blavatsky suffered terribly, although no one had any idea of it. These occult brotherhoods wanted to teach occult wisdom only in the orthodox way. For this reason, they banded together against H.P. Blavatsky. She intended to bring specifically the wisdom of the future to the West. However, since she was not understood, she turned to the East and allowed herself to be inspired by the wisdom of the East, which she wrote down, entitled The Secret Doctrine. That is Eastern wisdom. An answer should be given to the question that has been posed concerning the appearances of the masters in Adyar. It is not the responsibility of the esotericist to decide whether these appearances are genuine or not. The masters of the West have spoken less noisily than the masters of the East. The call from the masters of the West goes out to all in the West, asking whether they want to attach themselves to the leadership of the two masters of the West. If we wanted to introduce the wisdom of the East here, to follow the Eastern training here in the West, then that would signify ruin. For the West, we need the wisdom of the future, Western training that is given to us by these two masters. Earlier, the Western school was attached to the Eastern, subordinate to it. Now the two are only connected in brotherhood, but are proceeding entirely independently alongside one another. The Western school is from now on no longer subordinate, but coordinate. What is given through me on behalf of the masters of the West proceeds independently, alongside what Mrs. Besant teaches on behalf of the masters of the East. The Christian esoteric training and the Christian Rosicrucian training continue to exist in the West. The former trains through the feelings, the latter through the understanding. The declining races in the East still need the Eastern training. The Western training is the one for the races of the future. That's the end of Record B. Record C is an excerpt, fairly short. In order to bring evolution forward, the masters must also be in a physical body. The master of the sixth dawn is Christian Rosenkreuz, Jesus of Nazareth. Christian Rosenkreuz. If we try to take this into our feeling and let it become an experience, then we will understand that there must be an esoteric school of the West and one of the East. They stand next to one another, equally valuable. Each has its two masters, Mahatma Kutumi and Mahatma Morya, Master Jesus of Nazareth and Master Christian Rosenkreuz. One of these schools is led by Mrs. Besant, the other by Dr. Steiner. A decision must be made as to which one wants to turn to. The end of Record C. Record D is again also somewhat short. Drops of dew are a reminder of the water of the divine primal womb that gave birth to the human being, and at the same time a reminder of baptism, of the baptism done in memory of this water. Every single dewdrop is a memorial, a last remnant of this divine connection. Chao and Tao, Tao, are the same. Our souls once felt in the Tao, Tao, this resting in the divine. We have descended into a matter. Again, we have purified ourselves from this matter so that we have become so transparently clear as a drop of dew. When the astral body has become a diamond-like soul, then we ascend in the three triangles and receive the divine word from the Creator that rests in the IAOERO. We then receive the bread of life of Buddhi, the Christ principle that is expressed in the golden cross. Gold is the color of Buddhi. At the same time, the transformation occurs that is the deepest idea in the Last Supper, in the Holy Grail. The fire of the blood that has become unholy again becomes holy, pure, and chaste. It again assumes a plant-like nature. And then we achieve, when we work in the whole wheel of life. That is when our will is working in the world will that guides evolution. When we have totally immersed our will in the Father will, union with the Father. This is indicated in the wheel of life, in the waters of wisdom, Manas, in the cross and the roses, Buddhi, in the wheel of life, Atman. ERO also contains Christian Rosenkreuz. Do you Ross Crocs? That's the end of Record D and the end of that esoteric lesson. This is the next esoteric lesson given in Munich on June 6, 1907. Record A is a manuscript from Anna Weissman. Record B, manuscript from Alice Kinkel. This is Record A. We must become clear concerning what the foundations for an esoteric training are and what their nature actually is. The school that we belong to is organized in such a way that there are various circles within it. All those who newly come to it are seekers. Those who advance further belong to the practicing, and the actual training then attaches to this. Our school breaks down into these three circles. We have all entered the esoteric school in order to develop certain organs within which enable us to experience higher worlds ourselves. Altogether, how does one develop organs in oneself? All our organs have arisen through our earlier activity. We would like to illustrate this with an example. There was a time when none of us had eyes yet. At that time, humans moved in a hovering, swimming fashion in a watery primal sea. Their sense of direction was provided by an organ that today is present only as a rudiment. This is the so-called pineal gland. It lies in the middle of the head under the cranium, somewhat turned in. With many animals, one can see it if one lifts the cranium. With this organ, humans in past ages could tell if they were approaching something that would harm them or be useful to them. Above all, it was an organ for perceiving warmth and cold. When the sun shone down on the earth at that time, humans could not see it, but the pineal gland drew them to a place in the watery sea where the sun warmed the water. And this warmth gave them a feeling of blessedness. At such locations in the water, they remained for a long time and came close to the surface so that the rays of the sun could meet them. End. Through the rays of the sun falling directly on their bodies, our present-day eyes were formed. Therefore, two things were necessary so that eyes could arise. First of all, the sun had to shine down. On the other hand, humans had to swim out to the places that were warmed by the sun and expose themselves to it. Had the people of that time not done that, but rather said to themselves, "I want to develop only what already lies within me," then they could have developed an even larger pineal gland, a monster of an organ. But they never would have acquired eyes. In just the same way, we must imagine the development of spiritual eyes. One must not say, "Higher eyes already lie within me. I must merely develop them." Close quote. Neither could human beings develop the sun out of themselves, but they could develop the eyes to see it. So too, we can only form the organs needed to see the spiritual sun, the higher worlds, but cannot develop that sun out of ourselves. And we could never develop the organs, unless both the spiritual sun were shining on us and we hurried to expose ourselves to it so that it could shine on us. The places where the spiritual sun shines for us are the esoteric schools, and those who are at work in the esoteric schools. Amen. By its rays. When they conduct themselves according to the instructions from the school, every organ that had a past will also have a future. The pineal gland will again in the future be an important organ, and those who are in esoteric schools are already working on its development. The exercises that are given to us have an effect not only on the astral and etheric bodies, but also on the pineal gland, and when the effects are very penetrating, they go from the pineal gland out to the lymph vessels, and from there into the blood. But not only those who are now doing occult exercises, but indeed all humans will have a developed pineal gland in the future. And with those people who will constitute an evil race, it will be an organ for the worst and most terrible impulses. And it will be so large that it forms the largest part of the body. As one sees many gnats in the distance as a swarm of gnats, so one would then be able to see the earth itself as a great gland in space because so many glandular human bodies will be walking around on the earth. However, those who have developed their pineal gland in the proper way will have a noble and perfect organ. Now, we want to consider more closely the exercises that have been given us, while bearing in mind that these exercises are what makes our souls receptive for spiritual sun rays. To a certain extent, the 6 auxiliary exercises serve as preparation for the actual esoteric exercises. In those who devote themselves to these auxiliary exercises with a proper earnestness and enthusiasm, they will create the fundamental soul constitution necessary in order to derive the proper fruit from occult exercises. Number 1. Control of thought. For at least 5 minutes daily, one should take time to reflect on an object as insignificant as possible, in which one has no interest from the outset. One should logically connect everything one can think about this object. It is important that it be an insignificant object, for it is precisely the control that one must then exert on oneself in order to abide with it that awakens the slumbering faculties in the soul. After a time, one notices in one's soul a feeling of solidity and confidence. Now, you must not imagine that this feeling overwhelms you with surprising power. No, this is a very fine, subtle feeling that you must listen for. Those who claim that they absolutely cannot sense this feeling within are most like those who go out to find a very small, delicate object among many other objects. Indeed, they do seek, but only superficially, and then they can't find the small object because they overlook it. One must listen very quietly, and then one senses this feeling. Indeed, it appears primarily in the front part of the head. If one has felt it there, then one pours it into the thoughts in the brain and into the spinal cord. Gradually, one then comes to think that rays are going forth from the forebrain back into the spinal cord. 2. Initiative and action. For this exercise, one must choose an action that one thinks up for oneself. If, for example, one takes as an activity the watering of a flower, which is given in the instructions as an example, then one is doing something entirely useless. For the action must arise from one's own initiative. That is, one must think of it oneself. Then, with this exercise, a feeling soon makes itself noticeable. Something like this, quote, I can achieve something, or I am more diligent than before, or I feel the need to be active. Actually, one feels this in the entire upper part of one's body. One then tries to let this feeling flow to the heart. Number 3, superiority to pleasure and pain. For example, one feels oneself starting to cry. Then it is time to do this exercise. One forces oneself with all one's might not to cry now. The same holds for laughing. When laughter comes, one tries not to laugh, but rather remain calm. This does not mean that one should not laugh anymore, but one must take oneself in hand and become master over laughing and crying, and if one has overcome oneself a few times, then one soon senses a feeling of calmness and equanimity. One allows this feeling to flow through one's entire body, by first pouring it out from the heart into one's arms and hands, so that it radiates out through one's hands into one's deeds. Then one lets it stream to one's feet, and at last to the head. This exercise demands serious self-observation. One should carry it out for at least a quarter of an hour every day. 4. Positivity. One should know how to find the kernel of goodness in everything bad, how to find the beautiful in everything ugly, and also the little spark of divinity in every criminal. Then one gets a feeling as if one were expanding out of one's skin. It is a feeling similar to the feeling of becoming larger that the etheric body has after death. If one senses this feeling, then one lets it radiate away from one, through the eyes, ears, and the entire skin, but mainly through the eyes. Number 5. Openness. One should keep oneself flexible. Always be capable of taking in something new. If someone tells us something that we consider improbable, nevertheless, there must always remain a little corner in our heart where we say to ourselves, this person could be right. This does not need to make us undiscriminating. We can always check the facts. Then a feeling overcomes us as if something were streaming toward us from outside. This we draw in through our eyes, ears, and our entire skin. Number 6. Balance. The 5 previous feelings should be brought into harmony by giving each of them an equal amount of attention. These exercises do not need to be done for 1 month each. It is just that a period of time has to be indicated. What is most important is that these exercises be done precisely in this sequence. Those who do the second exercise before the first derive no benefit whatsoever, for it is just the sequence that is important. Some even think they must begin with the 6th exercise, with harmonizing. But can anything be harmonized when it doesn't exist? For those who do not wish to do the exercises in the proper sequence, the exercises are useless. It is as if someone wanted to climb a set of 6 steps and wanted to take the 6th step first. It is just nonsensical to want to begin with the 6th exercise. Then, most of us have received a morning meditation. One should do this early in the morning at an hour one sets for oneself, and that one adheres to, as strongly as possible. One first meditates on 7 lines. For several of us, the words are, in pure rays of light shines the divinity of the world. In pure love to all beings radiates the divinity of my soul. I rest in the divinity of the world. I will find myself in the divinity of the world. In doing this meditation, one should not speculate concerning these 7 lines, but rather live entirely within them. One should imagine them very graphically in pictures. Thus, in pure rays of light, here, one feels oneself flooded all around by rays of light that penetrate to one from all sides. One sees its radiance as clearly as one is capable of doing. Shines the divinity of the world. One imagines that it is God who is flowing toward one in these rays. One tries to feel him and take him into oneself. In pure love to all beings radiates the divinity of my soul. One imagines how one lets the divine rays that one has received stream forth for the great joy of all beings. The closing lines should awaken the imagination and feeling that one is entirely embedded in the rays of God, and that one finds oneself within them. Those who wish to imagine this especially graphically can ultimately also imagine a tree that they are especially fond of, and to which they gladly returned, After these 7 lines, a word or a sentence is given to us for contemplation. This concentration on a word or a sentence, for example, string, is very important. This is a kind of watchword, a word of power that is adapted exactly to the soul constitution of every individual. One should let this word resonate in one's soul, as one would strike a tuning fork, and as one listens to the sounds of the tuning fork fading away, so one should, after meditating on the word, let the sound of it fade away in the soul. One should devote oneself to what has been brought about in the soul by the word. In conclusion, one meditates 5 minutes more on his or her divine ideal. What kind of ideal it may be does not come into consideration. What is of concern is only the creation of the proper mood in the soul. It doesn't matter whether one thinks of the master or of the celestial sphere. Atheists have even come who thought they did not have a divine ideal, but their attention was drawn to the celestial sphere, which nevertheless draws forth a feeling of devotion and reverence from everyone. Those who have begun with these exercises should remain with them and not skip them when they are just not feeling like it. The astral body and the etheric body soon get used to these exercises and revolt if they do not get them. An interruption, or worse, a complete cessation, is very dangerous under all circumstances. The evening retrospection is also important. It must be done backward, since we should accustom ourselves to the way of perceiving on the astral plane. When doing the retrospection, one must imagine everything as graphically, as pictorially as possible. Of course, at the beginning, if one had 80 significant experiences, one could not call up all 80 pictorially in one's mind. Here, one must make a wise selection, until finally all the day's experiences unroll before one like a tableau. Again, what is important here are the small, insignificant actions. For it is precisely our effort to recall them that awakens powers in the soul. The end of Record A. Okay, the end of Record A. This is Record B. It is incumbent upon us today to hold an hour of instruction, indeed one for discussing some elementary facts of esotericism. In an esoteric school, one distinguishes between seekers and those who practice the exercises. One also distinguishes steps, those that one can ascend. All of you, my dear brothers and sisters, are more or less seekers. You wish to become those who practice the exercises. Now you must develop organs for these exercises. How is this done? What is now an activity in a person will later become an organ. But I will now say, some of you have already heard, but that doesn't matter. Repeated hearing fosters occult power. An organ that is rudimentary in present-day human beings is the pineal gland. Earlier, it played a very important role. This pineal gland is embedded under the cranium, somewhat turned in. Earlier, it was the organ humans used instead of eyes, which did not exist at that time, to perceive, to feel warned. By means of this organ, human beings who at that time still hovered or swam felt themselves drawn from the cold world's sea toward the warmer places within it, which were shone upon by the sun. At those places, human beings felt a kind of blessedness, if the beings of that time had wanted to do nothing more than what already lay within their abilities. That is, to develop the pineal gland. Then they would have become beings with monstrous pineal glands, with a monster of an organ. But they let themselves be guided by this organ to the places in space that were shone upon by the sun. In this way they developed their eyes, for which at that time they had only the germ. For an activity later becomes an organ. They experienced a feeling of well-being at these warm places, but when their eyes saw the sun for the first time they felt pain. By overcoming this pain, humans earned the ability to see. You must do the same with the exercises that have been given to you, and thus you will develop the organs that will guide you later up into higher worlds. You do not find God in yourselves, but rather you must develop the organs in order to get up to Him. 2 paths are shown to you. You will advance number 1 through study, number 2 through these exercises, unless you are too complacent to do them with patience and endurance. The exercises are divided into a morning meditation, an evening retrospection, and those preliminary exercises that are given to all of you. The 6 steps of the auxiliary exercises are to be done in the sequence indicated. For only in this way is occult power developed. If you have finished with the 6 months, then you start again at the beginning. An example was given. We go over a bridge that is 6 steps long in order to get to a goal. There, too, we cannot take the 6th step first. Rather, we must take the 6 steps in sequence. The 6th step harmonizes the 5 preceding steps. If we wanted to take that one first, one would have to say, "Can something be harmonized where there is nothing?" Close parenthesis. All abstract thinking has no value at all for occult development. Thinking in pictures is the only thing that has any value there. The 6 steps of these auxiliary exercises are the following. The first step is control of thought. The second step is initiative and action. The third step is overcoming pleasure and pain. The fourth step is called positivity. The fifth step is openness. The sixth step is harmony of the 5 steps. Number 1, control of thought. For this purpose, one takes an insignificant object, since what is important is the effort that calls forth the inner powers, not our interest in the object. For example, a matchstick, a hairpin, a steel pen, etc. One can ask oneself how the object came into existence. What does it consist of? How is it produced? Where is it produced? What would happen if the object did not exist in the world? The more effort you must put into it and overcome yourself, the better it is. It is the same case as before when the eyes came into existence. Hold, an object that does not interest you. In your consciousness for 5 minutes, that is what is important. Then you are happy when you let it go. Number 2, initiative and action. Some of my pupils have done this exercise wrongly when they carried out the given example, watering flowers, instead of carrying out an action that they would otherwise never have carried out, as was intended. It must be an action that one has come up with out of one's own soul. Everyone must find his or her own initiative action. Its usefulness is not important. It must not happen as a result of necessity or from one's good will. For example, giving 10 cents to the poor. Nor should it be done because it is ethical. The activity that creates occult organs must happen as a result of one's own initiative and strength of mind. Number 3, overcoming pleasure and pain. With a strong will, one must master pleasure and pain. So they do not carry one away. We must change from being the horses to being the driver. That's from Plato. If the impulse to cry rises within us, we should suppress it with all our efforts and say, "You are not going to cry now." The same holds for laughing. This is all intended only for a certain time, about a month. 4. Positivity. What is intended is expressed in the following legend. Christ Jesus went walking with his disciples. There they saw by the road a dead dog that was very decomposed. The disciples turned away full of disgust and said, "Oh, that ugly animal." Christ Jesus, however, stood there, looked lovingly at the carcass, and then said, "This animal has such wonderfully beautiful teeth." This positivity is drawing out and seeing the beautiful and the true, even in what is ugly or evil, in the criminal or in falsehood. Subtle self-observation also belongs here. Number 5, openness. We are open to new experience. If someone tells us that a straight upright tower overnight suddenly stands crooked, say at a 45-degree angle, and we do not say, "No, I don't believe that. That's impossible." One must develop the feeling that nothing is impossible. Number 6, bring harmony into the 5 steps. The 5 previous steps are the precondition for this step. The sequence is extraordinarily important. One must not want to do the 6th step before the first 5 steps. Nothing is harmonized if there is nothing there to harmonize. While these 6 exercises are not bound to any specific hour of the day, although as described they must be done daily, the meditations must always be carried out at the same time. One introduces the meditation by creating a feeling of calm. For approximately 2 minutes. Calm is a word bearing great occult power. Gradually, a feeling of calmness will be noticeable in the whole body. That is the end of that esoteric lesson. The next esoteric lesson was given in Kassel, June 20th and February 27th, 1907. Notes from Ludwig Kluberg, originally written in Latin. The pupil should constantly bear in mind the fundamental principle, "I can wait patiently." And impatient, striving effort does not bring us forward. Whatever anyone does will bring fruit in the future. The great masters made this promise. The pupils should meditate upon the first formula every morning at the day's beginning. Beforehand, they should separate themselves from all care and any thoughts. When human beings rise at break of day, they come from the astral world and feel restored and calm. Then the first meditation. Do not think about the words, but rather let them flow into the self. They contain the highest powers. For they have not been assembled arbitrarily, but with the highest wisdom. Meditate upon everything pictorially. Retrospection lasts. Look back not at the important things, but at unimportant things, and do so from the end of the day to the beginning. Memory is the bridge that leads us to the invisible chronicle. Streets, fields, flowers, stones, etc. We have in our retrospection so that we either call them up in our memory or we actually look at them with our eyes. This happens in the previous order of time. But there is another kind of retrospection, as if the sequence in time were rather in space. So-called memory is gone. But something higher is achieved, backward, because in the higher worlds everything runs from end to beginning, and thus is the pupil to prepare. Retrospection should take place without regret, because regret is egotism. See and think everything, so that it does not depend on the sensory world. Imagine the earlier moon in that way. Not with sensory images, but in such a way that anyone who considers matter the only reality would say it is a fantasy. The other example is the three logoi. The Holy Spirit is sound. The Son is light. The Father is fragrance. They are clearer in the other worlds where they are freed from things, and the sound, light, and fragrance of the world permeate space. This is the first imagination, led us to higher realities. This is just a brief version of what was said. The next esoteric lesson, that was the end of that esoteric lesson. This is the next esoteric lesson given in Stuttgart on September 15th, 1907. Manuscript from Anna Weissman. There are those among you who have already been doing esoteric exercises, and also those who are just now beginning with them. What will be said today is of importance to all of you. You must bear in mind that the personality who is speaking to you is making himself entirely into a mouthpiece. For those lofty individualities whom we call the masters of wisdom and harmony of feelings. Concerning the esotericism that you are all striving for, you must be entirely clear about the following. It is extraordinarily important that humankind of the present age receive a powerful infusion of esoteric life. Pestilence, epidemics of insanity, horrible wars would rage in a terrible way among humanity, with materialism getting the upper hand, unless humankind is deepened in the spiritual realm according to the decision of the wise masters. Despite the fact that a diffusion of spiritual life is now absolutely necessary, despite the fact that today there absolutely must exist esotericists in much greater numbers as before. There have always been esotericists. It would be absolutely wrong for esotericism to want to propagandize. There must be esotericists, but not all humans should be esotericists. A very simple example can make this clear. Is it not the case that everyone needs shoes, and therefore it is necessary that there be cobblers? But it would be all wrong to conclude that everyone should become a cobbler. Neither do all humans have to become esotericists. However, all those who want to become esotericists are given the task to spread theosophy, in this incarnation or one of the next, and to foster the spiritual life of humanity. At all times there have been three kinds of esotericists. They should be trained in three different ways. In the schools of initiation, the three kinds of training are 1. Initiation. 2. Clairvoyance. 3. Adepthood. In earlier times, these three kinds were distinguished from one another rather sharply. In order to understand this, we again take an example from everyday life. Imagine a country in which there are no railroads and no locomotives. And then imagine that some inhabitants of this country travel to another country far away, where there are such locomotives and railroads. With respect to railroads and locomotives, these people are initiates, and when they return home they can tell their fellow citizens what they have seen. But the fact that they have observed locomotives and railroads, and can speak about them, does not mean that they are anywhere near being able also to build railroads. A long course of study is required to become an engineer. It is exactly the same with initiates and adepts. Initiates have traveled in a foreign country, the higher worlds. They know how things look there, and can speak about it. However, in order to then become an adept, that is, in order for them to wield the spiritual forces themselves, which they have seen at work, requires again a long period of training in the spiritual world. Many initiates need a long series of incarnations before they achieve adepthood. For the forces of the spiritual world are more difficult to handle than those in the physical world. In the past, it was the case that initiates and adepts supplemented one another's work in the most beautiful way. In esoteric brotherhoods. Today, for example, an engineer who knows exactly how a machine should be built does not actually have to build the machine him or herself. There are workers for that. And the workers, who know how to build a machine superbly, do not need to know exactly the laws according to which the machine was created. Thus someone could be an initiate and see and understand the forces and laws of the spiritual world in their unfolding, but not be able to intervene in these forces him or herself, and form something out of them, A second kind of esotericist would be the clairvoyant. Today they cannot be distinguished from the initiates, as sharply as in more ancient times. Back then, though, clairvoyants formed a special group among esotericists. You can all well imagine that there can be very clever and educated people who are, however, very short-sighted. There could even be someone who knew the laws of optics very exactly, and nevertheless was short-sighted. When doing experiments, he or she would have to rely on those who see well. He or she would afterward have to explain to them what they observed, for without the explanation they may well not have been able to grasp it. It is just the same with initiates and clairvoyants. An initiate need not also be a clairvoyant at the same time, and a clairvoyant need not be an initiate from the outset, namely in ancient times, of which we are now speaking. Many people could not be brought to clairvoyance. They then became initiates. That means they achieved full insight and understanding for spiritual truths and laws, but could not see them. Now there are others in the same brotherhood who were clairvoyant, without at the same time being able to understand what they saw. They told what they saw to the initiates, who explained it to them. Adept as the third kind of esotericists were then in a position to make practical use of what was seen by clairvoyants and explained by initiates. A very beautiful collaboration existed in these ancient brotherhoods. There was required then a mutual love and tolerance, a great trust such as is no longer at all possible today. Indeed, such as hardly anyone today can even imagine. Our age is much too egotistical, loveless, and suspicious for anything like this to be possible. For this reason, an initiate today is also, always to a certain extent, clairvoyant and vice versa. Indeed, it is not even possible to train people otherwise. It is also deeply based on the conditions of our times. That depth of truth must recede almost entirely. Our egotistical age is not in a position to make use of such lofty abilities. No one restrains himself or herself in our age more than the adept, and even if they wanted to intervene in the destinies of human beings, they often cannot, although they have the power to do so, and could impart so much blessing. Precisely in the realm of medicine, which has sunk deepest into materialism, adepts must often watch, so to speak, with a bleeding heart. If this is still possible in such a lofty stage of development, how many, many thousands of poor, sick people languish without it being possible to bring help to them? But even if an adept would deign to want to help a sick person, then what must be done? Would so contradict the present age that he or she would at the least be sitting in a mental hospital the next day. Indeed, the doctors of the whole world would rise up against him or her. Altogether in spiritual life, it is the case that the highest adepts and initiates are the most reserved. Often, the highest adepts intervene only twice in the destiny of nations. In a couple of centuries, their power is saved up, so to speak, for very specific occasions. There just are certain things for which humankind is not yet mature enough. If one wanted to give these things to humankind, then they would work only destructively. Indeed, there are certain highest truths that you, my brothers and sisters, cannot yet receive. If I were to impart such a truth, then this room would empty within a matter of minutes. Present-day human beings simply cannot bear certain truths, even if they have already reached a certain stage in esoteric training. And yet these are precisely the very loftiest truths. And your development has the goal that you should one day receive them. But those who receive them too soon simply lose all stability and steadiness in life. Imagine a narrow footbridge laid over a deep abyss. How many of you could walk over it without becoming dizzy? Certainly not all. Now, if someone measured out a narrow strip with the width of the footbridge on the floor of a room and painted it, then everyone would be able to walk across easily without thinking, or becoming dizzy, or straying left or right from the strip. And yet all they are doing is nothing more than they would have to do on the narrow footbridge. That leads over the abyss. The continuation of the floor, to the left and right of the narrow strip, is what lends them safety and confidence. We human beings walk the narrow footbridge on the strip on the floor. The continuation of the strip is the physical world, the world of the senses. It gives human beings security and confidence, because it constantly corrects our false thoughts, feelings, etc. Now imagine that the boundaries of the sense world fell away. Maybe we did it again. Now imagine that the boundaries of the sense world fell away. Then the human being would hover in the air, as a matter of fact, without any external support. This is an experience that everyone must one day go through. You know what time. It is urgently necessary that theosophy flow into life, more and more, and in the coming years it will also happen more and more. precisely in your immediate surroundings this will be noticeable. People will hunger for theosophy as if for their daily bread. The truths, as they are spread according to the Rosicrucian method, can be fully understood by the ordinary intellect. Those people who cannot understand theosophical teachings simply do not want to exert their minds enough. You all know that the human heart stands only at the beginning of its development, and in the future will be an extraordinarily important organ. However, no one needs to take this fact on good faith, but rather the simplest observation and reflection allows us to recognize this. In the human body, we distinguish between smooth and striated muscles. All muscles that we can set in motion voluntarily are striated. All involuntary muscles are smooth. Now, it is a big riddle for modern-day science that the heart is made of striated muscle, even though it is an involuntary muscle. This must say to us that although it is not now a voluntary muscle, in the future it will be. And that is also the case. In the future, all humans will be able to cause their heart to move according to their will, as they today move their arm muscles. Nevertheless, many people are not so entirely wrong when they are unwilling, to begin with, to accept certain truths. A great deal depends upon also making these things understandable for people. We want now to bring a little clarity to how one can prove theosophical truths for oneself. We speak of the teaching of reincarnation and of the law of karma. Then some gullible people come along and say that the idea of reincarnation seems very believable and understandable, for all the riddles of life can thereby be solved. If one takes a look at life and sees how a child is born, frankly, in the gutter, and already from birth predestined to nothing good, and to pass his or her life in wretchedness and misery. And if one sees how a different child comes into the world in a palace, is surrounded from the first day by caring love, and is equipped with all the gifts of the mind, then here the teaching about reincarnation can give a good explanation. When it says that both children have themselves laid the foundation for the present life in an earlier incarnation. But then thoughtful people come along and say, the fact that you're teaching reincarnation can give a nice explanation for many of the riddles of life, does not mean that we are any closer to believing it. For an explanation is not a proof. Let's quote. People who speak in this way are entirely right, for I am not allowed to consider a Weltanschauung correct, because it is convenient for me. But it is also true that these people could, if they seriously wanted, give themselves a first-rate proof for the teaching of reincarnation. One can say to oneself, I will assume that reincarnation exists. Indeed, I do not believe it, but I can just assume it. I will act entirely in such a way as if my assumption were the truth, and wait to see what comes of it. Close quote. A person who thinks and acts in this way will make astonishing discoveries. With everything that happens to the person, he or she will think, in an earlier life, I myself have laid the foundation for this, and now bear the consequences of my own deeds. Close quote. If such a person once unconsciously acted foolishly, and the punishment overtakes him or her, that person will think, now I will immediately carry out this foolish deed once again in order to see that it was I who laid the groundwork to cause these ugly consequences. For if I myself am the cause, then now, when I consciously commit this mistake, the same consequences should set in. Close quote. This is the true meaning of the biblical words, quote, if someone strikes you on the left cheek, offer the right one to him or her as well. +4. Those who manage to seek the reason for everything that happens to them within themselves have accomplished a great deal. Those who do this will soon notice how it brings them forward, how they begin to free themselves from the chains of karma, and are increasingly able to take their own life in hand. Such people walk their life path freely and confidently. In a similar way, one can prove for oneself all the teachings of theosophy. Thus, we all want to try to carry the spiritual into life more and more, and that it become alive in us, to try to carry with the great masters, cause to stream into us in light and life. And you should all be clear that in the future the battles that theosophy, and in particular esotericism, will have to withstand, will constantly get more intense. What is needed is to stand firmly and maintain silence. Work done quietly is often the greater work. Learn to keep the silence, my brothers and sisters, and to stand firmly, while gazing at your goal and at the lofty masters who stand by us. That is the end of that esoteric lesson. The next esoteric lesson was given in Hanover. September 2005, 1907 is rather short. Manuscript from Wilhelm Huber Schleiden, First of all, there is a question whether this is actually from an esoteric lesson. The first part of the manuscript could be a summary of the beginning of Chapter 9 initiation from Eliphas Levi's work, titled Dogma and Ritual of Higher Magic, Volume 1, Dogma, Vienna, Munich, Planet. Leipzig, 1927. There's a second part, inserted in the manuscript, that has been left out here because it belongs to the esoteric lesson of November 29, 1907, according to the manuscript from Camilla Bondries. Okay, here's the little piece. 3 esoteric things are necessary for inner development. Number 1, the lamp of Hermes Trismegistus, with 3 flames. Number 2, the 3 times folded mantle of Apollonius. Number 3, the 3-fold jointed staff of the Patriarch, the Masters. The 3 flames with which one must live into the teachings are thinking, feeling, and willing. The study of theosophical teachings, the esoteric reports, to which one must devote oneself. One must not be content with the exercises. One must entirely live into the teaching of the 3 flames with willing, feeling, and thinking. Close parenthesis. The mantle is, so to speak, the skin. That one must come out of. Stepping out is the second fold of the mantle, and turning back to the body is the third fold, or turning. The end of that esoteric lesson. This is now the last esoteric lesson in this section. It's given in Berlin on October 9, 1907. Record A is a manuscript from Matilda Scholl and Leila Harris. Record B, manuscript from Marie Steiner. Archive number 3715. Record A. Everything spoken in an esoteric lesson is given to us directly from the Masters, and he who speaks it is only an instrument of their intentions. The difference between an exoteric and an esoteric lesson consists in this. The teaching and knowledge is received in the former, while in the latter something is experienced. The Masters are constantly speaking to human beings. Only those who are prepared, whose souls are open so that the Masters can find access to them, can hear their voice. Esoteric work is of the greatest significance for the evolution of the world, but also for the human being who occupies the simplest social position. The year 1879 is a most important turning point in the evolution of humankind, because of an event that took place on the astral plane. Since then, our culture has taken a different direction. In 1250, a spiritual stream began that reached its high point in 1459, when Christian Rosenkreutz was elevated to a Knight of the Rose Cross. Then, in 1510, an age began that in esotericism is called the Age of Gabriel. In 1879, the Age of Micaiah began. The succeeding age will be called the Age of Orifia. Great battles will rage among human beings. For this reason, a small band is being prepared now. A band that is destined to carry the torch of spiritual knowledge that will shine light in that dark age. Discussion of the meditation in pure rays of light. Imaginative picturing of the individual verses. Quote, "In pure rays of light shines the divinity of the world," close quote. The divinity pours itself as silver shining moonlight over the external world. We feel ourselves as if permeated by this light flowing through us and around us. In pure love to all beings, radiates the divinity of my soul. After going into the surrounding world, where we sought to recognize the divinity, we are absorbed into our own inner soul. And through the love that connects us to all beings, we find the connection with God and feel Him in our own soul. Quote, "I rest in the divinity of the world." The word rest, Ruhe in German, has a magical power. Those who manage to concentrate on this word and allow it to work on them feel as if they were entirely pervaded by a feeling of calmness, serenity, and peace. When we find within us a feeling for our connection with God, then we find within us this calmness and this peace. Calm surrounds us and penetrates into us. Quote, "I will find myself in the divinity of the world," close quote. And now there arises with us the imagination of a luminous point, a shining spark that shines to us from out of the distance, and toward which we strive, and within which we will find ourselves in the bosom of God. Significance of the individual sounds and their occult effects. E. Sinking into the innermost part of a being. Awe, the divinity poured out into surrounding worlds. O. Embracing everything with love. Boop, permeation by great serenity. The diphthong OEE, I believe, is concentration in one's own inner world, and then the diphthong AEE, the external expression. Introduction, preparation, exercise for overcoming fear. In the morning, plan to carry out an action at a specific hour in the afternoon. Think it through into the details. Do this exercise for 4 to 8 weeks. A further exercise. 1, 4, 7. Not sure what that means. Readers aside and readers aside is to plan to do something. Think it through on the 4th day and carry it out on the 7th day. A further exercise is as follows. On the 1st day, decision and procurement of all the physical necessities, characteristics. On the 12th day, vivid mental picture. Think through with feeling. Imaginative. On the 19th day, reflect on one's own powers and abilities. On the 23rd day, consider the hindrances. On the 27th day, prepare with love. On the 30th day, execution. That's the end of Record A. Record B. Just as this, it's very short, E. Striving upward to the divinity, to the soul of the world. I, holy awe before the divinity of God. Awe, the loftiness of the divinity. E, upward striving. E, somewhat less lofty. O, encompassing the divinity. E, to be frightened by the encompassing O, resting in the divinity of God. And that is the end of that esoteric lesson, and the end of this section of the book. This is a reading of Collected Works number 7,266, the first volume of 3 volumes in that Collected Works number by Rudolf Steiner. It is entitled From the Esoteric School. Esoteric Lessons given from 1904 to 1909. I'm reading this in sections, so there's multiple esoteric lessons in each section. This is section 14, I believe, and it begins with Esoteric Lesson, given in Berlin, on October 18, 1907, and Record A are notes from Paula Stritzik. Record B notes from the collection of Fred Pepe. Record C manuscript from Camillo Andri. In many manuscripts there is a second part to this lesson, concerning the esoteric significance of the cross, which, because of other related manuscripts, belong to the lesson of November 1, 1907. Record A, in November 1879. A victory was achieved on the astral plane. Michael defeated the spirit of hindrances, Mammon. In the physical realm, this battle has yet to be fought. Michael will fight with the spirit of darkness for another 400 years. We, pupils of the esoteric school, are called upon to spread light and spiritual life. During this period of time, Dr. Steiner received the assignment to announce this from the masters of the White Lodge. Mammon, the spirit of hindrances and darkness, has countless helpers who incarnate in bacteria. Fear of bacteria, as well as the struggle against them by doctors, is entirely justified. Michael gets his power from the sun, S-U-N. Gabriel prepared for the Michaelic age. He gets his power from the moon. Oriphiel gets his power from Saturn. He ruled the earth at the time of Christianity's emergence, and until approximately 109 years after. Isle gets his powers from Venus. He ruled the world until the time of Constantine the Great. Great devotion prevailed under him, martyrs and catacombs. Zechariah gets his powers from Jupiter. His power began at the time of the migration of the nations, dissolution of the West Gothic kingdom Rothschild. Mercury, close bracket. Samael gets his powers from Mars, so to speak, militant religiosity, the Crusades, etc. after the age of Michael, under whom present-day spiritual life reigns. An age of Oriphiel will begin again. An esotericist must acquire knowledge of esoteric facts. Oriphiel, the decisive battle. Spirits of Mammon incarnated in microbes. Study necessary. End of Record A. Record B. Oriphiel takes his powers from Saturn. He ruled at the time of Christianity's emergence until around 109 years after Christ. Aniel takes his powers from Venus. He ruled until about the time of Constantine the Great in the 5th century. Under him great devotion was developed. See the martyrs, life in the catacombs. Zechariah takes his powers from Jupiter. His power began at the time of the migrations of the peoples. The dissolution of the West Gothic kingdom occurred under Zechariah. Samael takes his powers from Mars. A militant religiosity developed under him, crusades and so forth. Michael takes his powers from the sun. As Gabriel, who preceded Michael, who rules today, takes his powers from the moon. After Michael's regency, a regency of Oriphiel will again follow. An esotericist should acquire a knowledge of these things. A victory over Mammon, the spirit of hindrances, was won by Michael in November of the year 1879 on the astral plane. Mammon, the spirit of hindrances, who is defeated in the spirit, must now also be defeated on the earth. We must help to do this. Michael, who rules for approximately 400 years like the others, will be replaced again by Oriphiel. Then a terrible battle will burst into flame. In order to help the good forces to victory, present-day theosophists will develop into helpers of Michael. Mammon has millions of spirits as helpers. They are incarnated in microbes and bacteria. Fear of them is well-founded. It is not an accident that bacteria are now researched and investigated so much. When Oriphiel is surmounted, then there will be peace. How soon that happens depends on us, the helpers. Studying is just as necessary. As the exercises, we must study and exercise in order to equip ourselves for battle. A single meditation often is more effective than many deeds in the world, that outwardly appear very great. Those who cannot study very much should study the little that they can very earnestly. It is a sin when someone offers resistance to spiritual wisdom. The end of Record B, Record C Oriphiel. Saturn. He has his powers from Saturn. Before and after the century of Golgotha, until 109 years after Christ, is the spirit of darkness, Anael or Ananiel. Venus, age of the martyrs, Constantine the Great. Zaccario Jupiter, age of the migrations of the peoples, dissolution of the Gothic kingdom. Samael, Mars, age of the Crusades and of the strong, powerful Germanic peoples, militant religiosity. Gabriel, Moon, until 1879. Michael, Sun, until 1879. Oriphiel, then the decisive battle. In November 1879, the god Mammon was defeated by Michael on the astral plane. This battle must still be fought on the physical plane. Mammon is in part incarnated in bacteria. He has countless helpers. All perversion and depravity are from him. It is a sin against the Holy Spirit. When one resists spiritual knowledge, it wants to flow into humanity. The organ for bringing this about was formed in the forehead at the time of Gabriel. It is now present and wants to be used. This higher knowledge should come into the world under Michael's regency. During 400 years. If Gabriel's regency had lasted longer, then this organ would not be able to receive any content and would continue to grow. It would be completed in arabesque detail. And finally, a softening of the brain, inhumanity would occur. However, if no spiritual content enters then, this organ will wither and become a source of illness, even of pestilence. Work of Gabriel, building up from within. Work of Michael, radiating in from outside. Already in the womb, this organ is being worked on in secret. Gabriel is the angel of secrets. Under Michael, secrets are revealed. Aside from these influences, however, the earth is subject to the forces of the planets in still another way. Aside from the spiritual effects of Michael's sun forces, the earth is also subject to influences from Saturn forces. They work on the same organs, hence the preference now for everything perceptible to the senses. Oriphiel is at work here too. When these two same forces come together in the near future, then the age will become much worse than it is today. The sensory aspect of reality will increasingly step into the foreground. We are called to fight against this under Michael's influence. Our task as pupils of Michael is to develop ourselves spiritually, to use this organ. Thus, esotericism is a mission that should be fulfilled. Esotericism loosens the bodies from one another. The age of Oriphiel comes after the Michaelic age. That will be an evil, painful age, in which all the terrible forces of egotism, the hardness, the brutality and lovelessness will be unleashed, a small band of spiritualized souls. As the task to allow the pure truth, love and goodness to flow into this painful age, and thus to cleanse it and bring the world forward. Toward the sixth day of creation, the dawning of which is now here, seaweed contains iodine in quantity, which has a specific task in the evolution of humankind. Bit caused the two bodies, the physical and etheric, which in human beings who earlier lived in an atmosphere of water, and whose etheric bodies were not yet firmly connected with their physical bodies, to unite, especially in the head. This iodine was concentrated in the thyroid gland. As soon as this malfunctions, cretinism occurs. An esotericist can see that the etheric head is not entirely moved into the physical head. In the case of a cretin, that's the end of Record C and the end of that esoteric lesson. The next esoteric lesson was given in Berlin. October 23, 1907. Notes from Amalie Wagner, the little chart at the beginning again. Michael draws his powers from the sun. Oriphiel draws his powers from Saturn. Anael draws his powers from Venus. Zaccaria draws his powers from Jupiter. Raphael draws his powers from Mercury. Samaya draws her powers from Mars. Gabriel draws his powers from the moon. Michael draws his powers from the sun. In November 1879, the regency of Michael took over from the regency of Gabriel. It is a sin against the Holy Spirit. When one resists spiritual wisdom, Gabriel arranged, evolved, and transformed the human brain so that the human being can now receive this higher science, which should and must come into the world under Michael. Had Gabriel maintained his regency longer, then the brains of human beings would have continued developing further in the same direction, and would have degenerated into arabesque. If no spiritual content now flows into these brains that have been changed and prepared, then this part of the brain that has been prepared by Gabriel would wither. From this comes sickness that is contagious, plagues, consequences of materialism. Gabriel, angel of secrets. Michael bears light out into the world. Already in the womb, brains are being worked upon. When we observe an object, the object is outside our head. It radiates into our eye and creates a mental picture in our brain by means of the image in our eye, creating a mirror image in our brain. Only by means of this process can we consciously perceive the object. There's a picture of a profile of a head above aiming toward the forehead, or 3 arrows, and next to them it says, "Effects of Michael's work." He sends the rays of light from above and outside into the brain that has been well prepared. On the left side, kind of lower left rising diagonally into the head, is effects of Gabriel's work. Picture. When meditating, this object is missing. It should be missing. Therefore, we ourselves must create the thought, the image, the mental picture. If we only daydream about something, then that is the work of the intellect. Through the mental pictures that we create ourselves, the forces of that which we have formed picture of can stream into us in pure rays of light. The power that we receive in esoteric lessons makes it easier for us to produce such pictures, imaginations. The teachings that we get in such lessons we should take up not only with the intellect, but also with feeling in the heart. We should feel them. Under Gabriel, spiritual science was kept secret. He is the angel of secrets. Under Michael, this science should stream out to the public at large. He is the angel of revelation. The Earth now, at regular intervals of time, stands under the influence of the Earth's Saturn forces. That is, the forces that the Earth retained from old Saturn, on which the first beginnings of our organs were formed. At regular intervals of time, the Earth is subject to the influences of the planets whose conditions we have evolved through. The forces of Saturn work on our sense organs, which have been developed to a degree never seen before. From this, it is understandable that humankind's striving and aspirations are directed in such large measure toward the world of the senses. Oriphiel gets his powers from present-day Saturn. In 400 years, he will again come into his regency. From the earthly forces of Saturn, then, unite with the forces of today's Saturn, conditions on the Earth will become much worse. The terrible perversions that we already see in the realm of sexuality will yet become much more widespread. They could not exist at all unless Saturn ruled the Earth. The sensory, sensual aspect of reality will increasingly move into the foreground. In order to fight this, when the time comes, trained fighters must be found. We are called to be trained in order to be able to fight this battle. Michael needs armies of helpers who will fight on the physical plane what he has already defeated on the astral plane. That is the great task that we have to fulfill. End of Esoteric Lesson. Esoteric Lesson, Hamburg, October 2006, 1907. Manuscript from Alice Kinkel. The right hand has been formed out of trust and is destined for work. The left hand has been created out of love and is destined for blessing. The right foot is formed out of confidence. The left out of steadfastness. The heart is the center of the body. The secret of vocalization. E. It is the middle point of a being and signifies inclination toward. A. Signifies devotion worship. E. Devotion somewhat weakened. O. Encompassing a being. U. Calm, resting in them. The angels of the cycles of time, each of which rules for a certain time. Their names are Anael, Samael, Oriphiel, Uriel, Gabriel, Raphael, Michael. Their adversaries are the multitudes of Mammon, which were all kinds of hindrances in our way. The masters also have to fight against hindrances of all kinds. The age that Anael rules is the age of love. When Oriphiel comes, he brings the wrath of God. During the age of Raphael, Christ Jesus will again walk on the earth, but in a very, very different form. We should prepare for this age. We will be reincarnated sooner in order to work in the age of Oriphiel. In the Bible, Gabriel is the announcer of birth. Gabriel is the one who prepares the evolving human being. He is the one who prepares, and Michael is the one who causes it to flow out into the world. The human being is interwoven, fragmented, dismembered in the entire cosmos. This is also the meaning of the myth of Dionysus. He is cut into pieces, but his heart is saved. Zeus brings it back. The next esoteric lesson, given in Berlin on November 1, 1907. Record A is a manuscript from Gunther Wagner, supplemented by Paula Stritzek and Wilhelm Huberschleiden. Record B, notes from the collection of Fred Pepe. Record C, manuscript from Camilla Mondri. Number 1, in pure thought you find the self that can last. Number 2, if you transform the thought into picture, you can experience the creative wisdom. Number 3, if you condense the feeling into light, you reveal the forming power. Number 4, if you materialize your will to a being, you create in the world being. Esotericism is on the one hand knowledge and mission. On the other, it is life. The esotericist has obligations to him or herself. In these 4 verses, everything is contained which can keep an esotericist busy for years into the future. Number 1. Pure thoughts are those that are related not to visible, tangible things, such as present-day scientific thought, but rather only to thought. That's, for example, the fundamental teachings of theosophy about the constitution of a human being, existence between death and life, evolution of the earth, etc. Pure thoughts give the human being a secure inner confidence. Pure materialistic thinking leads to inner insecurity and nervousness. Meditation leads to a loosening of the astral from the etheric body, and the etheric body from the physical. If one of these bodies is loosened too quickly in relation to the others, then deleterious conditions ensue, also on the physical level. For example, loosening the ego too quickly leads to nervousness. Unless pure logical thinking is practiced, this loosening can lead to dangers. The ways of seeing in the astral plane and Devachan plane are fundamentally different from the way on the physical plane, so that upon entry one is at first easily confused. Only the logic of thinking remains the same. Therefore, this in particular should be cultivated. One should not think thoughts that are attached to the world of the senses, nor experiment, but rather abstract thoughts that are purely noetic. Logical, pure thought works to strengthen the physical body and make it healthy. It makes the body less receptive to illness. Those who are accustomed to it, for example, mathematicians, have less to fear when they visit cholera hospitals. This is the case, however. It is less noticed since the connection is not recognized. In this way, confidence is achieved in all questions of life, both external and internal. Strong people listen only to their inner voice. Weak people, on the other hand, are always listening for advice and suggestions from others. Number 2, pure thought should be transformed into a picture. Should create a picture. For example, the mental picture of a plant, how it turns its blossoms to the sun in its striving upward. The human being is an upside-down plant, inwardly passed through the change of the human being into a plant-like being. The gradual transformation of the finer substances of the plant into flesh, absorbing desires, passions, and drives. Now human beings should again become spiritually, that is, consciously, plant-like. Therefore, they must be purified of all dross in the astral body until they have achieved the stage where they will later be creative themselves through the words that they speak. A further example, imagine the various planets substantially. The moon, for example, as if made of a kind of peat substance or living spinach, that is, a plant-like substance. Within it, lignifications, cork-like or bark-like, as we see in our present-day trees, are present that correspond to our physical framework of stone. Imagine, too, the condition of the sun as being full of life and spiritual development. Had we remained united with the sun, then we would have spiritualized too quickly. Therefore, the sun was expelled. However, if, on the other hand, we had remained as one celestial body with the moon, we would gradually become rigid and ossified. That's the earth. And with it, humankind maintained an equilibrium. Everything that was created by God was present first as a picture, just as painters have a mental picture before their eyes before they bring it to canvas. Number 3, if, for example, one feels how the sun is only spirit and creative joy, and the moon is a cold, austere, contracting, ossifying force, then the latter will call forth a light appearance that goes from orange to red into brown, while with the sun, the feeling is concentrated into a light appearance that goes from blue through blue-violet over into red-violet. If this light appearance becomes increasingly intense, then finally forms of beings will appear as bearers of the light and color. They acquire shape and form. Number 4. When the will of human beings, which today is still impure, still very little developed, grows stronger, then human beings will be able to create by means of their will. They will think their way into future realities that do not yet exist. For example, into the Jupiter condition, the future condition of the Earth. Jupiter, Venus, and Vulcan are to take the place of the Earth. Imagine oneself very intensely in this creation and join themselves to the will of the world leadership. Thus, they will help with this willing to create a new condition. They will be co-creators in world being. If all of humanity did not want the Earth to become Jupiter, then the Earth really would not become it. That would be magic. Black magic. Number 1. All 4 bodies of the human being must be developed simultaneously. If, for example, the eye is loosened too early, then nervousness sets in. The astral body is loosened, but this body must simultaneously be loosed in the etheric body. Logic is valid on all levels. Abstract thinking brings about health. Mathematicians have nothing to fear in epidemics. Strong people listen to the inner voice within. Weak people listen to the advice of others. Number 2, experience within the striving of the plants toward the sun. But the human being is an inverted plant. Inwardly experience the inversion. In this way, the human being is to purify the astral body. Also imagine the various natures of the planets. As God creates, so also the artist brings inner pictures to external expression. Number 3, the sun was and is spirit and joy of creation. The moon is cold, rigid, and contracting ossification. Sun, from blue through violet to red. Moon, from orange through red to brown. Number 4, human beings determine the forms through their will as they create. To the extent that human willing becomes purer, humans will develop into the proper way of creation with their increasing strength. End of Record A. Record B. In pure thought, you find the self that can last. Thinking in pure thought is the thinking of esoteric pupils. When they, for example, think about the origin of the world or of humanity, in this way what is achieved through meditation and concentration is prepared. Of the 4 members of the human being, the physical body, the etheric body, the astral body, and the eye, if one of these 4 members is loosened too quickly in relation to the others, then tremendous disharmony and tension appear here on the physical plane. A loosening of the eye that occurs too quickly, for example, creates nervousness. Therefore, at first, the eye should be loosened in the astral body, then the astral body in the etheric, then the etheric in the physical body. This is possible by means of a conscientious study in which the eye first experiences a secure footing and a point of support before a loosening occurs in the astral body. Because the logic of thought is the same on all levels, it is necessary to first acquire this logic on the physical plane so as not to come into confusion in the higher worlds. Nevertheless, one should not merely think thoughts that are taken from the sense world. Neither should one begin straight away to experiment, but rather one should think abstract thoughts that are purely spiritual. In this way, we find our self, our I, that can sustain and carry itself in the spiritual. This is the first step in order for us to find ourselves in the purely spiritual realm. After this, the pure thought should be transformed into a picture. Transform the thought into picture. You will experience creative wisdom. For example, one can imagine a plant with its head turned to the sun. On the other hand, the human being is an inverted plant. Now, one imagines inwardly the transition from plant to human being, how the delicate plant substance is gradually transformed into flesh, and thereby drives and passions are absorbed. Then one attempts to become plant again, but mentally conscious, and to purify the astral body of all dross until we have reached the stage where we can create the word. A similar exercise that makes our thinking flexible and lively, through which we transform an abstract idea into a picture, is the following. We imagine a plant, how it grows. Nevertheless, we remember that thus it only belongs to Maya. Now we imagine the leaves with a violet-red hue, the stem blue, and we also imagine the placement upside down, with the flower to the earth and the roots pointed upward. When we properly feel this, we will be able to experience ourselves as plants and grow into it, and thus grow upward to spiritual heights. For, quote, all imaginations will appear to us in the proper way if we imagine the world within us as Maya. Close quote. It is very good to perform such exercises with animals. Animals have undergone the rotation that human beings have undergone from plant being head downward to human being head upward, only halfway. For this reason, it stands in the middle between plant and human being, in the horizontal. That is the esoteric significance of the cross. Plants, animals, and human beings are expressed in its 3 directions. Additionally, one should imagine the various substances of the planets. The old moon is a kind of peat substance, or a kind of living spinach boiled salad. That is plant substance, within which are many precipitates, cork-like and bark-like, such as we now find in trees. Thereupon the transition to the sun occurred. If you condense feeling into light, you reveal the power to form. One feels here how the sun was only spirit, creative joy compared to the moon, which is something cold and contracting. For this reason, the moon had to be expelled. By awakening such feelings, one will be able to sense light appearances with the moon that go from orange into red and brown, while one can experience blue, blue-violet, and red-violet with the sun. If these experiences become intense, then the beings that are the bearers of this light will appear in the colors and acquire forms and shapes. If you materialize your will into being, you are creating in world being. If the will of the human being, which today is still impure, is cleaned and purified, then the human being will possess the strength of will required to create through it. Through the power of our will, we can imagine the planets that have preceded our Earth and those which will follow it. To place ourselves squarely within this creating, especially with regard to what concerns future planets, means to give form to our undifferentiated will and to co-create world being. If, for example, human beings do not will it, that Jupiter takes over from the Earth, then it will not be able to happen, even though it would be black magic. This is said only to show how powerful and strong the human will is and will become. In these 4 mantras is given the sequence of steps of higher knowledge. Thus we have the following correspondences. The first mantra, pure thought, through which we take hold of the I. The second mantra, imagination, picture. The third mantra, inspiration, light. The fourth mantra, intuition, being. Thus practiced, they lead the pupil from thinking into substantial being of the spiritual itself. Number 1. In pure thought you find the self that can last. Number 2. If you transform the thought into picture, you will experience creative wisdom. Number 3. If you condense feeling into light, you reveal the power to form. Number 4. If you materialize your will into being, you are creating in world being. The end of Record B, Record C. We experience the cross when we let the forces of our heart stream forth with all our devotion. First, into the hands and arms. In so doing, we imagine the horizontal arms of the cross. Meditative thought, the firm will that our hands should do only what is good and beautiful and will foster humanity. Second, into the feet. The horizontal beam is added to the lower part of the vertical beam. Meditative thought, that we stand firmly only at a place and go only where it is proper, good, and beautiful. Third, into the larynx. The cross is completed. Meditative thought, the firm will that we speak only what is right, good, beautiful, and helpful. Fourth, into the brain, with a most intimate will to think only thoughts that are pure and good. Experience the pentagram, and there's a star. First, the stream from the head to the right foot. Then from there into the left hand, further into the right hand. Then into the left foot, and then further back to the head. Gradually we must develop with ourselves the nature of plant being. We achieve this by approaching the divine with the greatest devotion, with the will to do the good as naturally as the plant blossoms and gives off its fragrance. Experience the cross and the pentagram by letting forces stream into our individual members with all our devotion. In meditation, create pictorial mental representations. That is the end of that esoteric lesson. Esoteric lesson given in Basel on November 2003, 1907, from the manuscript from Alice Kinkel. Who are the masters? Human beings who have gone the path of human evolution, only faster than other people. Human beings who have an earlier experience of spiritual development and can therefore be leaders. Such a personality was the unknown man from the highlands, or the great unknown one from the highlands, who worked in various ways. He is called from the highlands because he came from the world above. It was Jesus of Nazareth, who worked and lived under the name the Great Unknown One from the highlands in the 13th and 14th centuries. Johannes Toller was taught by him. Esotericists must achieve a genuine relationship to the masters, concerning the threefold revelation of Father, Son, and Spirit in the physical world. The world aroma that permeates the universe is the revelation of the Father. It is the primal substance. Today we call it odor. We have very little awareness of odor. Taste has revealed itself to us somewhat more. The world light that is the sun, the power of life. The world sounds. The sound that enlivens and weaves through the world is the revelation of the Spirit. The form, the mystery of vocalization. E, the midpoint to which the etheric body strives. Ah, full of reverence and devotion. A, reserved reverence. O, encompassing, enclosing. U, resting, enveloped. The path of the Indian goes straight up into the astral world. At the beginning, pupils are very helpless on this path. For this reason, the guru's strict instruction is necessary. Because it is impossible for pupils to correct their own mistakes, even the perception of fact leads to harsh contradictions in the astral world. In the astral world is only an inner orientation. For example, the colors of objects in that world flame forth out of the objects or beings, then move, streaming, flooding, sounding through space after they have come out of the object. These colors, odors and sounds then enliven other things. One must learn to experience colors dissolving from flowers. One must think of the colors floating freely in space. This experience leads into the astral world. Dissolving sound so that it sounds forth, floating freely in the air, leads into the devachanic world. Experiencing aroma as a world aroma leads to the Father. Imagination is the dissolution of color from any object. For this reason, imagination is incredibly important for an esotericist. The end of the esoteric lesson. Next esoteric lesson is given in Berlin on November 29, 1907. Recorda notes from Gunther Wagner. Record B, manuscript from Camilla Wandry. Record A current streams through the etheric body in the form of a pentagram. From the point of the eye and the forehead, toward feet, from there to the antipodal hands, and from one hand to another through the heart. The currents are bent. With the bending of the body and the limbs, the various planets are connected to the various parts of the currents, as indicated. One should think of the planets more as principles that are always at work and on all globes, only on the individual planets in an extraordinary way. The principle Saturn, the physical foundation. Sun, eternal growth, eternal progress. Moon, arresting, retardation, rigidification. Mars, courage, leading aggressiveness into the life of the senses. Red blood. Mercury, bleeding out of the life of the senses. Jupiter, liberating of the eye. Venus, devoted in love. The colors indicated correspond to these planets, that is, these principles. Saturn, green, Sun, orange, Moon, violet, Mars, red, Mercury, yellow, Jupiter, blue, Venus, indigo. The hexagram corresponds to currents in the astral body. Yet this is not to be understood as a line drawing. Rather, the double triangle is only a cross-section. While the currents in the etheric body form the lines of a pentagram, the hexagram represents the astral body in an entirely different way. Not in lines, but rather as a body with surfaces. If the figure is rotated around its vertical axis, the real figure emerges, even though the horizontal cross-section does not correspond entirely to a circle. Oval. Thus, the horizontal lines actually form a surface. The line above at the level of the arms, the other line at the level of the knees. The triangle pointing down has to do with the body. Astral body, moon, etheric body, Sun, physical body, Saturn principle. The other triangle has to do with the higher parts. Sentient soul, intellectual soul, and consciousness soul, which is only at the beginning of its development. Jupiter. Correspondingly, the colors. One should meditate on these figures and the meaning of their details in order to become conscious of one's real inner life and one's relationship to the cosmos. One will then awaken singular feelings within oneself. The end of Record A. This is Record B, the principle of Saturn, the physical foundation, but spiritual. The principle of the Sun, Michael, orange, gold close parenthesis, eternal growth, eternal progress, individual life. The principle of the Moon arresting, retardation, rigidification, appearance in Maya. The principle of Mars, courage, aggressiveness leading into the life of the senses through red blood, consciousness. The principle of Mercury, opening in devotion of pure love, Sun. Transition from God to human being, mediator. The hexagram corresponds to currents in the astral body. However, it is only a cross-section. If the figure were rotated around its vertical axis, the real form would emerge, whose horizontal cross-section would not entirely correspond to a circle. The upper surface is to be experienced at the level of the arms, the lower surface at the level of the knees. The triangle pointing downward has to do with the physical body's Saturn, Moon, astral body, Sun, etheric body. The triangle striving upward has to do with the higher parts, sentient soul Mars, intellectual soul Mercury, consciousness soul Jupiter. By meditating intensely on these figures, we acquire knowledge of ourselves and our connection with the macrocosm. The pentagram represents the currents of the etheric body and its connection with the planets. The physical body is connected to all the forces in the universe. It is the middle point of radiation from all the forces of the zodiac. To begin with, the etheric body is connected to the middle point of the earth. The astral body is connected to the middle point of the moon. The eye is not just one point that is gradually united with the physical body through the growth of the front part of the brain and the entry of the etheric body into the area above the root of the nose. Rather, there is a second point of it. The line connecting this point changes. The direction of this line points to the center point of the sun. The more the human being develops, the more these 2 points approach one another. Humans who are evolving must place themselves in this point, that is, outside, and they must learn to look at their body as if looking at something physical, external to themselves. For this is Tattvas that redeems the human being from egotism. A lively recalling and experiencing of the mystery of Golgotha and the fact that the superfluous egotistical blood of humankind flowed there is a help to this end. Meditation should be like sacrificial incense that rises up to the gods. There is then a whole page devoted to the pentagram, and there's quite a few details there about colors and the like. I'm not going to read that. It's on page 229 in the book. And then on page 230, again a complete picture of the hexagram. I will not be reading that. That is the end of that esoteric lesson. This is Esoteric Lesson given in Munich on December 5, 1907. Manuscript from Anna Weissman. At the start of an esoteric lesson, it is always good to become clear about what an esoteric lesson actually signifies. What we speak of in such a lesson does not actually differ in content from what we hear in an esoteric lesson. Everything that is explained in an esoteric lesson also stands under the influence of those high beings, that we call the masters of wisdom and harmony of feeling. However, what we experience in an esoteric lesson stands under the very direct influence of the lofty masters, and is conveyed only with their unmediated influence and with complete responsibility to them. For this reason, it is not so important what we are given to listen to in an esoteric lesson. For this reason, it is not so important what we are given to listen to in an esoteric lesson as it is important that our souls experience something. What is important is how the soul relates to what flows toward it in terms of spiritual currents. The soul mood before and after an esoteric lesson must be very different. And it is not at all essential whether a soul has present in his or her mind what was experienced in an esoteric lesson. But he or she must have the feeling that something was experienced, something was taken away from the lesson. It must be like an electrostatic machine that is sometimes charged with electricity, and sometimes not. The same way one knows one's own name, one must carry in one's soul what one has received in an esoteric lesson. Is it not so that one knows one's name as soon as one is asked? Even when one does not always repeat it to oneself. So too the stream of esoteric life must always rest in the soul. Esoteric life will then always deepen our soul more and more. And this is necessary for the times that are approaching us. All of our culture has its origin in the spiritual world. There, the plans are formulated according to which our lives then unfold on the physical plane. Here below, we see only how one event follows after another according to physical laws. But the great spiritual causes remain hidden from us to begin with. Events on the higher planes of our existence are what first bring about the physical events. Let us be very clear about this and take an example. A particularly important event occurred in the year 1879 on the astral plane, and indeed in November. And then there's a chart here showing the war in heaven. From this point in time onward, the esoteric life took an entirely different direction, very different from previous ages. The esoteric stream that lived in humankind since the 14th century was then replaced by a new esoteric stream. The esoteric life from the 14th century until November of the year 1879 unfolded very differently from that in our time. At that time, all esoteric life took place in complete silence and seclusion from the external world and matured in isolation. Toward that year, 1879, under the guidance of a lofty spiritual being, the Archangel Gabriel. Gabriel signifies annunciation, prophecy. For this reason, the Archangel Gabriel also has the role of the messenger in the Gospels. Under his leadership, the spiritual life matured quietly, well protected and hidden as a child in the womb, and in November of the year 1879, there occurred on the astral plane something very similar to a birth. What had slowly matured since the 14th century could now be carried forth into the world in an unrestrained way, if only for a minority of human beings. Readers aside, I was mistaken. This is not concerning the war in heaven. My apologies, and of readers aside. The rulership of Gabriel was replaced by another archangel, under whose leadership we now stand, the Archangel Michael. He is the radiant sun that esoteric wisdom lets shine forth in a small band of people. Under the rulership of Gabriel, it remained hidden, and materialism developed in external life. However, we must not look upon materialism as something evil, for it is a part of the divine plan of creation and has a purpose and destiny in the universe. But now the time has come under Michael's radiant leadership, in which the esoteric sun should shine brightly. For the dark powers of materialism are getting the upper hand. The radiant leadership of Michael will again be replaced by a dark, horrible age that will begin around the year 2400. Already today, simultaneously with Michael, a dark god has entered into his rulership, the god Mammon. For esotericism, Mammon is not only the god of money, he is much more the leader of all vile black powers. And his hordes attack not only human souls, but also the physical bodies of humans in order to gnaw away at them and to ruin them. People speak of bacteria a lot more today, not because they know more about them, but because bacteria have taken on a very special form today. And in the future they will get the upper hand in a terrifying way. When that black age approaches, then fraternal war will rage in a gruesome way, and poor human bodies will waste away, terribly afflicted by diseases and plagues. The stigma of sin will be impressed on human bodies, visible to everyone. Then another angel will have the rulership Oriphiel. He must come in order to shake people up through gruesome tortures to their true destiny. And in order for this to take place in the proper way, a small band of people must be prepared today, so that then, in 400 to 600 years during the Black Age, it can spread esoteric life and lead humankind. Those today who, under Michael's regency, feel the impulse within themselves to take part in spiritual life are called to serve the Archangel Michael and to learn under him, so that they will one day be mature enough to serve also the formidable Oriphiel in the proper way. A sacrifice is required of those who wish to consecrate themselves to a higher life. We should receive the spiritual life and want to experience an awakening only with the understanding that in exchange for it, we later will apply ourselves, our will, everything. Only in the service of humankind in 400 to 600 years. That little band of people that is being prepared today will serve the god Oriphiel so that humankind is saved. If in that age such people wanted to take over the spiritual leadership who had not been prepared to stand firmly in all storms and defy the hordes of Mammon, then they would not be able to serve the Archangel Oriphiel in the right way, and humankind would not be raised up out of its misery. However, so that this happens, we must work today with all earnestness in order to fulfill our tasks at that time in the right way. However, when the dark powers are raging most horribly, then the brightest light is also shining. Oriphiel has already occupied the regency once. That was at the time when Christ appeared on the earth. At that time, all over the earth, evil powers of ruin and decadence ruled. And only with gruesome means was it possible to shake the human race awake. Oriphiel is called the angel of anger who purifies humankind with a strong hand. The Bible's story of Christ swinging the lash to purify the temple of money changers has a profound meaning. At that time, when it was darkest on the earth, the Christ appeared as the Savior of humankind. 109 years after Christ appeared, the regency of Oriphiel was at an end and was replaced by Anael. Then Zachariel followed. Then Raphael. During the time of the Renaissance, Samael ruled. And then Gabriel from the 16th century until November 1879. Then Michael assumed the regency. At around the year 2400, Oriphiel, the terrible angel of anger, will again assume the leadership. And then, as once before, the spiritual light will also shine brightly and radiantly in the darkness. Christ will again appear on the earth, although in a form different from the past. We are called to receive him, to serve him. If you, my brothers and sisters, let live within you what thus streams into your souls in terms of spiritual life, so that it echoes in your meditations, then you will have the proper fruit. You should let what you have received continue to work, to echo in your meditations. While you are doing that, the spiritual powers of the world are streaming into you. Spiritual currents are always flowing through the world. They come from the great masters of wisdom and harmony of feeling. The masters are constantly pouring forth streams of love and wisdom over humankind. But human souls are not always prepared and open to receive. However, the words of meditation are words of magic. They open the gates of the soul so that divine life can pour in. For this reason, one should not merely speculate about these words with the intellect, but rather open the soul for powers that are higher than merely intellectual powers. If one speculates with the intellect, then only those forces become active that are already present within one. But higher powers are supposed to awaken with one's meditations. One should not want to solve riddles, but rather let riddles be solved by them, for they are far wiser than the intellect ever can be. For this reason, one should let them completely work on one and receive what they cause to flow into the soul. One should let them live entirely within the soul. The words of meditation are not thought up through speculation, but are born out of the laws of the spiritual world. Something very special lives in every vowel. The vowels have a specific sound value, and not everyone has the same value. And just as the soul feels the effects of the sounds, it should also devote itself to the pictures conveyed by the word. When meditating, one should be as far away as possible from abstract thought. One should strive to think as concretely as possible. Let us take a meditation formula that almost all of you know. In pure rays, with the first line, in pure rays of light. One can more or less imagine pale, shining moonlight that represents the gentle light of God flooding creation. This image should live very clearly and intimately in the soul with the words, in pure rays of light shines the God of the world. Then the lines follow, in pure love to all beings, raise the divinity of my soul. Now we seek to permeate entirely the gentle moonlight with our love. We seek to pour it into ourselves so that through the warmth of our own love the gentle light begins to radiate. And in the flood of rays we feel God in our souls glowing. With the following words, I rest in the divinity of the world. We seek to imagine the divine spirit is flowing all around us. We can feel ourselves as if in a lukewarm bath, entirely embedded within divine substance that encompasses us entirely as a mild, lukewarm bath. I will find myself in the divinity of the world. With these words, we can think of a distant lighthouse that is shining to us and permeate ourselves with the feelings that we will find our own self in the divine. However, it is not only the pictures that live in the soul during meditation that draw us toward the divine and open the gates of the soul. A deep wisdom and lofty divine life are also put into the vowels. It is not a matter of indifference which vowels sound in the soul. Let us consider the vowel E. The I always expresses a centralization, a striving toward a center. Ah signifies something entirely different. It is an expression of inner worship of the divine. The E strives toward the center of the universe, while Ah remains distant and bows in worship before the Most Holy. Let us consider our meditation in German in this light, in pure rays of light, in the pure radiance of the light. In the first E of the German text, the soul strives toward the divine center in awe. It falls back in devotion, and in the second E, it again hurries toward the divine, in the pure radiance of the light. Okay, now in the second line we have, shines the God of the world. In German, glänzt die Gottheit der Welt. The A represents a weakened awe. The worshipful devotion of Ah is transformed into A in reticent devotion. The human being in holy awe does not dare to approach God. However, in the O following, the soul hurries to encompass entirely the divine with holy love and ardor. The O always expresses a loving embrace, glänzt die Gottheit der Welt. In the following line, in pure love to all beings, in the pure love for all beings. The I leads the soul again directly into the divine center. Then in Ah radiates the God of my soul. Strahlt die Gottlichkeit meiner Seele. The soul again becomes all adoration, and as the shy reverence of the A in the second line was transformed into an intimate embrace of the divine. So here in the fourth line, the full, warm, reverential worship of the AH is weakened into a shy wanting to embrace that hardly dares to touch the divine. E in the fifth line, I rest in the divinity of the world. Ich ruhe in der Gottheit der Welt. The UO predominates. It always expresses a resting, an embedded quality. Now the soul is blessed rest. Now the soul in blessed rest is melded together with the divine into one. In both of the two last lines, the E always returns. I will find myself in the divinity of the world. Ich werde mich selbst finden in der Gottheit der Welt. At the conclusion, the soul is constantly led deeper into the divine center of the world. This is one point of view. How one can understand the meditation, and a small part of the deep wisdom that rests within. It would be confusing if I wanted to tell you what kind of deep secrets are still hidden within. There is no letter and no sign contained within that does not have a deep, deep meaning. Thus sounded the divine word of creation when it once caused the universe to come into being. You once heard it sounding, but your souls were not yet aware of it. At that time you descended from the Spirit, and you will return back there in full consciousness. Born out of the Spirit, living in an earthly body. Through the power of the Spirit you will return to the divine spirit of the world,